Early finish today. We're going to hand over to Harry, Benjamin and the team in a very wet and windy, by the looks of it, Melbourne, Australia, for the first Grand Prix of the season. It's all yours, Harry.
Thanks, Johnny. Yeah, welcome to Melbourne. They really said go to Australia for Formula One in the sunshine, over 30-degree heat. That is not the order of the day, with rain lashing down on us at Albert Park. One thing's for certain, though, F1 is back.
Verstappen has rolled the dice and scored a hard four times a champion in Formula One. McLaren are the 2024 F1 Constructors Champions.
Wow, we're talking Formula One.
Lewis Hamilton wins for Ferrari.
Every time you get into a Ferrari, it's just there's such a special feeling. Even just working with the team, it's really unique.
Charles Leclerc wins the Monaco Grand Prix, the first Monegasque driver to win around the streets of the Principality since Louis Chiron in 1931.
My only dream that remains to be ticked is to be a world champion.
George Russell wins the Las Vegas Grand Prix.
You've got to believe. I'll go to Melbourne believing we can win.
Lando Norris wins the Miami Grand Prix.
I think of how to achieve it. I don't need to think of what happens when it happens.
Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, a champion in Formula One.
Oh, it's been a long winter, but finally Formula One in 2025 is underway with so many questions and storylines to follow. How will Lewis Hamilton stack up against his new Ferrari teammate Charles Leclerc? Are McLaren the team to beat? Could home hero Oscar Piastri put himself in with a chance for the win this afternoon? Well, we are less than half an hour away from the first lights out of the season. I'm Harry Benjamin, and this is 5 Live F1 from Melbourne. It's the Australian Grand Prix. Well, with 6 fresh faces alongside experienced drivers moving teams, 2025 is set up to be a mouth-watering prospect. We're in Albert Park, a couple of kilometres from the city centre and about a 20-minute walk from the beach. But there won't be many on the sunbeds this afternoon as we're all huddling for shelter from the rain. It's nice and dry in the commentary box, which is just at the end of the start-finish straight. Alongside me in that box is the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley and the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. Taking the hit for us this afternoon in the wind and the rain is Rosanna Tennant. Our eyes and ears on the grid. Have you found any shelter, Rosanna?
There is no shelter down here on the starting grid, Harry. It is really cold. It's 17 degrees. That's half the temperature we had yesterday here at Albert Park Circuit. And it feels like 11. That's what my weather app is telling me. The rain is still falling. The teams have put up their gazebos up and down the starting grid. And mechanics have been tasked with holding them down because it's incredibly windy as well. One nearly took off. I had to help a Sauber mechanic hold on to it before it headed off into the catch fence. And as I look out into the grandstand on the start-finish straight, all the fans are taking their places and they're all wearing ponchos. They've got their caps on. You can almost see the papaya orange underneath the ponchos because everyone is here supporting their home hero. The buzz is really special here in Melbourne. And finally, people are heading out onto the grid. I thought they were a bit fair-weathered, but they do want to see all the action. The grid is filling up. The drivers are starting to take their spots.
You'll be asked to help out on the Sauber pit stops before you know it, Rosanna, if you keep offering help. We'll come back to you throughout the course of this grid build-up. Thank you, Rosanna. Mark, I mean, the rain is continuing to come down, but all the fans are supporting Oscar Piastri. It's a front-row lockout for McLaren with Lando Norris on pole position. McLaren, well, we thought they might be the favourites coming into the season, and so far, in the dry qualifying at least, that seems to be the case.
Yeah, very much picked up where they left off last year, haven't they? With a really strong end to 2024, developing that car, outperforming everybody in that development race, really, in the second half of last season. It culminated with that amazing Constructors' World Championship, the world title coming back to Woking, and it looks like they're going to start the season in similar strong form. You're right, though, that was all in the dry. Typically in Formula One, a good car is a good car in almost all conditions, and that's what McLaren will be hoping today. But don't forget, they've got the Rainmeister, Max Verstappen, sitting right behind them in P3.
They certainly do, but I know, Andrew, I know it's only the start of the season, but last year, towards the end of the season, in places like Monza, in Hungary, with papaya rules being implemented, team orders for the two McLaren drivers, what is the state of play? What are the rules of engagement when it comes to the two McLaren drivers going into turn one if we get a normal standing start in this weather?
Well, it's pretty straightforward at McLaren, Harry. They're allowed to race each other but not allowed to hit each other, basically. Both cars have got to stay in the race, stay on the track, and that's it. Those are the papaya rules. Later in the year, who knows what might happen in terms of one helping the other, but there we are.
Well, let's speak to the CEO of McLaren, Zak Brown, talking to Rosanna.
I'm just going to grab a word with Zak. Zak, congratulations yesterday. The perfect start to the season. How proud are you of the team?
Oh, they've done a great job. All the men and women at McLaren have built a very fast race car. We got two great racing drivers. Tricky conditions here, so no points scored yet. So now we just need to have a good, clean race in what are some very tricky conditions.
How do you manage this one, Zak? Everybody's talking about rules of engagement with your two drivers. Lovely problem to have, having such strong drivers. But what have you said to the guys going into this afternoon?
Go race.
I love that. You're such a racer. But it is going to be tricky out here. Turn one, critical. Maybe a few elbows out that you're not expecting?
Oh, they've always got their elbows out. I think it'll be a safety car start because the visibility looked really poor. From what I could see, I think the worst of the rain is behind us, but it's still a very damp track.
Well, good luck in converting the pole position and the front row to podium places in that win.
Thank you very much.
CEO of McLaren, Zak Brown, giving us his weather report then. So maybe a safety car start, but we are hoping that, the deluge that we had earlier on today is starting to ease up. Mark, George Russell came out with some quite interesting quotes after qualifying yesterday about McLaren, saying, well, they're so far ahead, it's all in the tyres, they can focus on 2026 now.
Well, look, I don't think it's quite that straightforward. Everybody at McLaren is very confident, I can tell you that, and that's a really good insight into the fact they've got a great car, but even more so, they've got a great team. 2024 was all about learning how to operate back at the front again. They made some mistakes, but they've learnt from all of those. So they are in a really, really good place. So yes, I don't know if they can consider the championship wrapped up just yet before we've even turned a wheel in anger, but they are in a strong position to start this campaign.
We've got a long season ahead of us, 24 races to go from Australia to Abu Dhabi, but so far it's advantage McLaren. Lando Norris taking his 10th career pole. Scott McKinnon is speaking with him.
Well, Lando Norris, you're looking pretty chilly under there. How are you feeling after that pole position yesterday? You're making a habit of it, aren't you?
I try my best. I feel good. I mean, sketchy with the weather. I feel a little bit sorry for the fans who are sitting out here for so long, but I'm hoping that it won't be too bad later and the rain dies down. And we'll be able to get a good race in.
Do you sleep well at night after you put it on pole, or are you someone that's thinking about all 58 laps around here and trying to make sure you're the first car across the finish line as well?
No, I slept beautifully last night, so I'm good. Of course, nervous and anxious and excited at the same time. A good little mix, I would say. So, many question marks, many unknowns for today. It's a long race. Many things can happen. A lot of opportunities, but we're ready to go.
What's going to happen down into turn one? Because there's a bloke behind you, the local favourite here, or the local hope, I should say. What are we expecting into turn one today? What does Zak Brown let you do?
We're free to do whatever, just not touch. We're both competitors, we're both racers, and we both want to win. So we'll see.
Stay warm. Good luck in the race.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Stay warm for Lando Norris. Will he stay dry though? Rosanna, what's the latest with the weather?
It's so changeable, Harry. Suddenly it was raining a bit heavier and now it's lightened up again, but definitely rain still here over Albert Park Circuit, and it's so greasy on the start-finish straight. That's why the teams have brought out their gazebos. I've got mechanics in front of me wiping down the cars. Obviously, they've already done their installation lap, so just making sure no bits of grass or any gravel got stuck in the bodywork. So I'm just watching Yuki Tsunoda's mechanics polishing his racing bull, just making sure it's absolutely perfect before the race starts.
Yeah, the wind certainly picking up as well, Rosanna, with the ponchos that some of the fans are wearing in the grandstands opposite us, absolutely fluttering about as the wind picks up. So the weather then indeed very, very changeable. Coming back to Lando Norris, though, we talked up so much last year, didn't we, Mark, about could he challenge the title despite not having come out the blocks so quickly in 2024? And a lot was made of his mentality and that agility he has, not only on the track but off it. Do you think he's learned quite a lot and developed since, well, halfway through last year to now?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he has to have done, doesn't he? First of all, he's a very young driver anyway, so he hasn't had these kind of experiences that he was starting to get last year, where he's running at the front, he's challenging for race wins. Don't forget, he never got a race win till halfway through last year. And also, of course, by the end of that, challenging for a world title, that comes with a huge amount of different pressure. The ups and downs, mentally, the roller coaster that comes with that is clearly just a massive learning experience. So he's definitely going to be better prepared this year than he would have been last time out. Well,
starting behind the two McLarens will be Max Verstappen, the reigning champion, the man defending his title and going for a fifth. Made his Grand Prix debut 10 years ago here. Yeah. Unbelievable how quickly time flies, isn't it? But that Red Bull hasn't actually been looking that quick all weekend.
No, certainly not at the beginning of the weekend. They looked like they were really struggling. Max Verstappen frustrated on the team radio, the car just not being able to do what he needed it to do to get a lap time out of it. I have to say, though, overnight on Friday, between the first two practice sessions and FP3, where it was, I must say, still very dry, the car seemed to take a giant leap forward, and he was able to at least mix it at the front. I suspect there might be even a little bit more performance than the eventual qualifying lap time showed for Verstappen, but he still wasn't quite on a level with McLaren. Today, though, in the rain, it's almost a bit of a reset in terms of car performance, and we know how good he is in the wet conditions. Just think back to Brazil last year. Tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, from the back of the grid all the way to the very front. Andrew, how much of Red Bull's, well, drop in performance since their domination days is down to the likes of Adrian Newey leaving the team?
Well, it's a really interesting question, Harry, isn't it? Of course, they would say it's nothing to do with Adrian Newey, and but lots of other people think that you can't lose someone of that calibre and not take some kind of hit. Obviously, it's still early days. It's one qualifying session. We don't really know where the Red Bull is holistically compared to the McLaren and its other rivals. Andrea Stella, the McLaren team principal, was saying yesterday he didn't really believe the gaps that were yesterday. It was like 3.5 tenths between the McLarens and Verstappen. He thinks that some teams underperformed, like Ferrari, for example. So we'll have to let the season develop a little bit before we make too many conclusions about where Red Bull are. But it certainly does look like McLaren have, at least in the dry, have a step advantage. But one of the other things Stella did say about Verstappen is in the wet, he's just mega.
And that is all she said, isn't it? For somebody of the calibre of Max Verstappen, you can't quite ever rule him out, regardless if it is rain or dry. Well, the cars are on the grid, which is absolutely packed. The gazebos are up and the umbrellas are being flipped upside down. And, well, I suppose if we do get a safety car start, Mark, I suppose it takes the pressure off a little bit for the likes of the Lando Norris and the Max Verstappens.
A little bit, I guess. Disappointing for us, let's see, but that's probably the way it's going to go, I'm afraid.
Well, it certainly is. We'll run you through the entire grid in the next 10 minutes or so. But the drivers, the last minutes of them rushing to the circuit to try and make sure they get there ready for the anthem. The grandstands are absolutely packed and the rain is still coming down here in Albert Park. We are just moments away from the first race of the season. Australia back as the opener. Here's the anthem. The Australian national anthem to properly kickstart the Grand Prix.
Let's do it for Australia, lads, come on!
And as you could imagine and hear, the roars of the crowd and the singer and the announcers absolutely loving Jack Doohan, the Australian rookie, and of course Oscar Piastri representing their country. But of course, let's just go back to Max Verstappen. He will start in third place, and if we do, we haven't had a confirmation, by the way, of any kind of safety car start yet. But if we do get that for somebody like Max Verstappen, then how do you strategize for the race going forward?
Well, I think, look, on any wet occasion like it is today, getting through the first couple of corners are always the biggest challenge. When it's a normal race start, it's chaos, isn't it? Or it can be. This is a very slippery circuit with walls that are very, very close to the track. It punishes mistakes very fast. So I suspect most drivers, particularly towards the front end, will balance risk against reward, and perhaps with a safety car start, if that's what we get, will be a nice, easy way to get going.
Let's head down to Rosanna, who's talking to Christian Horner.
Christian, P3 for Max Verstappen today. Was that what you were expecting coming into this weekend and the season?
I think it was better than we thought, but we've been working on the car all weekend, and we managed to make some good improvements here.
Is it helpful that it's rained today for you, do you think?
Well, it's another variable, so you've got to react to what's going on. The same for everybody.
And in terms of Liam Lawson's performance so far, is it just unlucky? Is it performance-based? What have you said to him coming into today's race?
He had an unlucky, a tough day yesterday, but he's a tough character. He'll put it behind him, and that's not indicative of his ability.
Good luck for this afternoon.
Thank you.
Team principal of Red Bull, Christian Horner, there overlooking his drivers Max Verstappen, and of course the rookie, a full season rookie, Liam Lawson, even with 11 Grand Prix under his belt, starts from the pit lane after changes made under Park Vermey. We'll come on to him and his rather troublesome weekend so far, but let's hear from his teammate Max Verstappen speaking to Scott McKinnon again.
Well, Max, at the start of the weekend, you didn't seem too happy with your car, but things seem to have been trending in the right direction. And you're happy here today, and you're happy that we've got some precipitation coming down.
Yeah, it's again very different to the rest of the other days that we had here. So it's going to be interesting. It's definitely going to be quite hectic, I think, for everyone, but hopefully also exciting at the same time.
I keep thinking of Brazil last year, from 17th on the grid in the rain all the way to first. You're in third, starting third today. So what can we expect from Max Verstappen fighting these two McLarens who have really laid down a marker so far this season?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, every wet race is very difficult. It's very slippery, so we have to remain calm. It's also the beginning of the season, so it's important to just score points also. But when there is an opportunity, I'll, of course, go for it.
I love this. When we're going around waving to the fans, everyone's so nice, chatty, having a good time. How different is it when you get into that car, put the visor down for the first race of the season?
Well, I think what is nice, we all get on very well. We have a lot of respect for each other, but of course, naturally, when we go in the car, we try to beat each other, and I think that's how it should be. But I think it's a good group of people and drivers that we have at the moment in F1.
Max Verstappen sounding very cool, calm and relaxed then ahead of getting into the car for the first race of the season. Now, talk of global headlines, Mark, not just Formula One headlines. This has been rumbling on now for pretty much a year. Lewis Hamilton will finally start his first Grand Prix for Ferrari in just under, 10 minutes' time. How have you made of what you've seen so far of Hamilton throughout the sessions building up to this weekend?
Probably what I expected to see, which was a sort of steady start from Lewis, a little bit behind his well-established teammate, who, by the way, is very quick, Charles Leclerc. He's well-established in the team, but also fast. So Lewis had to gradually build towards him, and that's what he's been doing. He's ended in qualifying a couple of tenths behind the sister car, the other Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. But I think generally as a team, we probably would say that Ferrari have maybe underperformed based on what we thought they might be able to do in terms of mixing with McLaren. So maybe more to come from both Ferraris, including Lewis.
Well, let's hear from the 7-time champion talking to Lawrence Bortoleto.
Lewis, just in these first few corners, we've seen an incredible amount of support for you. The roar down Melbourne Walk this morning as well has been insane, all the way over the other side of the world. What is it like, especially as your first day as a Ferrari driver?
It's been incredible this first few months, and then to be here and to see the crowd here. It's been really enjoyable. I mean, the weather's been crazy. It's been so warm and beautiful weather for the whole week, and then today woke up and just grey, like England weather, but a little bit warmer. But the support is insane. I think looks like the biggest crowd we've ever had here. It gets bigger and bigger every year.
Yeah, it feels packed out. What was it like when you woke up this morning? Did you sleep very well? Had some nerves? Because there must be so much built-in excitement inside for your first race as a Ferrari driver.
Yeah, I know I didn't feel nervous. I woke up quite early. I couldn't sleep too long. Woke up early and I looked across the city, and such a pretty city, this one, Melbourne. And I think I got a really great view of like the train station and the river. And just like contemplating, like I was messaging with my brother, I was messaging with my family and my mum. It's just very surreal for us, and we're incredibly grateful for this opportunity. It's even in the garage yesterday, my dad's like, wow, we're in Ferrari, dude. Just having to keep reminding ourselves. Not that you don't get reminded because it's red everywhere, but it is phenomenal to be here and have this different experience, which as I said, I'm really grateful for. And I hope today, I'm just building with the team constantly. Today's a new experience again. Everything's the first at the moment time for me, so I'm hoping today. I've never driven the car in the rain, so understanding the settings, the communication with the team, the strategy that they run is different, and so we'll be learning on the fly, but I hope it can be a good day.
But the good thing is you're always good at the wet, Lewis, and I know that you don't know this car very well, but from P8, with these conditions, you can try and do something special maybe.
I mean, there's always that, you hold on to that hope, and you hope so, for sure. I think getting the tyres working today, and as I said, I've got the 3 laps of the grid for my first time in the rain with this car to really feel and hopefully see if I can get on top of it as early as possible. But I'm sure through the race, just going to progress more and more. We haven't had a race here in the rain for a long time as well, so it's going to be challenging for everyone, but should be fun.
Well, wishing you the best of luck. Good luck today. Thank you.
Lawrence Bortoleto speaking to Lewis Hamilton. Let's head back down to the grid with Rosanna.
And Harry, I'm right by Lewis Hamilton on the grid. He's just got into his Ferrari, a really special moment. His father watching on, having a photo taken in front of the car. Very, very special scenes at Ferrari. The gazebos have been cleared, and I've been joined by the team principal of Williams, James Vowles. Wow, you guys put in a shift yesterday. Both cars in the top 10 for the first time here in Australia for 20 years. James, you're doing something right.
I didn't realise the stat. That makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. Brilliant job by the team. Really, really impressive. We have 2 world-class drivers, and I think you're seeing the payback for that now. It's going to be a hard, difficult race this afternoon, though. For just describing it, it's damp on the ground, but there's big puddles around the track. So it's going to be a touch-and-go few laps at the start, and there's another shower on the way in half an hour.
So you don't think you're going to have a chance to get to slicks before that shower comes?
Not before the shower. I thought originally without that we may get to slicks at some point. Let's see now.
Wow, it's going to be a challenging one. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rosanna. Yeah, speaking to the team principal of Williams there at the end, James Vowles, with Albon starting in 6th and new signing Carlos Sainz starting in 10th, the man that had to make way at Ferrari for Lewis Hamilton. Andrew, let's just come back to Ferrari because they did underperform yesterday. It's not relative of where we think their performance actually lies.
No, they kind of fell back through qualifying. Charles Leclerc particularly has been very quick all weekend. He was a 10th off Lando Norris, who eventually took pole, obviously, in the McLaren in first qualifying, but by the end of qualifying, Leclerc was 6th, I think, 10th off pole position, which is not what anybody expected of the Ferraris. They were suffering, with their tyres overheating in the final sector. That was affecting everybody to one degree or another. But it seems like Ferrari, as Leclerc put it, didn't go with the track. You have to go with track evolution in qualifying, modify the car's settings as well as you can. Feels like they got something a bit wrong there. I don't think it's indicative of their overall performance.
Well, Charles Leclerc will start this race from 7th, just ahead of his teammate Lewis Hamilton. Will be following Hamilton's progress throughout the course of 58 laps of the Australian Grand Prix. Hamilton's old team, Mercedes, just one car up at the top with George Russell, now the team leader. He has, I was about to say he's gone quietly about his business, but he nearly put it in the wall in practice earlier on in the weekend. But that seems like a solid job for Russell in 4th to be in and amongst it in that Mercedes.
Yeah, I think George did a really good job actually qualifying yesterday to be that close, because the guys in front of him really were on song and got pretty much everything right, particularly the team Mclarens. So I think Mercedes will be very happy with that. Of course, on the other side of the garage, they've got their new signing, Kimi Antonelli, and that was a very different story altogether. That was a disappointing result, although maybe expected. When you bring rookies into Formula One, particularly at a top team, the pressure's high, the learning curve is steep, and maybe they need to give him a bit more time to get something on a similar pace of a very experienced now George Russell.
Certainly is. Well, let's talk a little bit about the rookies. Kimi Antonelli with a damaged car in qualifying made his life difficult. He starts down in 16th. But actually, some of the more outstanding rookies were maybe the ones that we didn't really expect to do so well. I refer to Isaac Hadjar in the Racing Bulls. He's now teammates to Yuki Tsunoda. And Gabriel Bortoleto in the Sauber, out-qualifying his teammate Nico Hulkenberg.
Yeah, two really strong performances, particularly Bortoleto, I think, because his teammate is the very experienced Nico Hulkenberg, who we know has been able to deliver over and over again a very long career in Formula One. And Bortoleto comes in his very first ever experience, and yeah, you're right, out qualifying through to Q2, whereas Hulkenberg didn't make it out of Q3 and out of Q1, sorry, and that was a really strong result for the team. It will have massively boosted his confidence. Of course, it puts him in a nice position for today's race, but the confidence is really the thing that's going to help a young driver through this weekend, but on into a season as well.
Bortoleto and Hadjar went head-to-head last year for the Formula 2 Championship. Bortoleto ultimately came out as champion, with Hadjar having to settle for second. Bortoleto was also managed by Fernando Alonso and his management group, and Bortoleto was asked, I think, something quite funny yesterday at some point by one of the media about how he felt there being only a few spots behind Alonso, and replied saying, I'm planning on dive-bombing him down into turn 1. Then he said, just kidding, I just want to learn and try and improve. So I think they and Bortoleto and Hadjar both in a really good mindset for those two rookies. Tough mindset, tough afternoon though for a couple of the other rookies. Liam Lawson in the Red Bull, who we have already spoken about, and Ollie Bearman, who has had probably the worst debut for a rookie I think I can remember.
I actually don't think it could have gone any worse. He had a big crash in the very first practice session. It really was quite a big one, high speed, hitting the wall, damaging the car substantially, and that meant, although their best efforts, despite their best efforts, they weren't able to get that car rebuilt in time for FP2, so he missed the entirety of that session. We get overnight and they put the car all back together for FP3, and on his very first lap he spins and beaches the car in a gravel trap again, missing that session too. So it was really, really difficult. And then beyond all of that, he goes into qualifying clearly underprepared and finds himself with a gearbox issue that means he wasn't able to set a representative lap time. So he is starting, to say he's starting on the back foot is something of a massive understatement, isn't it? It couldn't have gone any worse, but look, things can only get better from here.
Yeah, both Liam Lawson and Ollie Bearman starting from the pit lane. Andrew, the other interesting fight that I'm always interested in is the best of the rest. And at the moment, the standouts from qualifying yesterday have to be the Racing Bulls of Yuki Tsunoda up in 5th, just ahead of the Williams of Alex Albon. How do you reflect on their performances so far?
Well, it's a really interesting question. We see these outstanding performances from Racing Bulls sometimes, and in the next race sometimes they're 18th, and I don't know, obviously this is the first race of the season. Tsunoda's done an outstanding job to be 5th on the grid, and again the same with Williams. Alex Albon in 6th, Carlos Sainz down in 10th. Sainz was actually quicker than Albon for most of the weekend, so I think he's left a bit on the table. I spoke to his father, Carlos Sainz Sr., the rally legend, earlier, and there was a couple of things that got in Carlos Jr.'s way in qualifying. He thought he could have been ahead of Albon, obviously, as his dad, but I think the other person who's missed out is probably Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin. He's out-qualified his teammate Lance Stroll despite having damaged his car in qualifying by running wide. He could have been in the top 10 too. So there's lots of sort of little snippets of things that we might have to keep an eye on for the rest of the season.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, with Sainz, Mark, qualifying in 10th for his Williams debut, he said, well, that kind of vindicates my decision straight away. Out of all the teams he had offers from, which is pretty much everybody outside of the top 4 that had spaces, seems like he did make the right call, even if he's been out-qualified at the first race.
Yeah, I suspect Carlos Sainz will be slightly disappointed to be 10th on the grid, and that tells you quite a lot about the level of performance he was able to bring to that Williams. So I think this is a team on the ascendancy. Whether they can do major things this year, I'm not sure, but in 2026 and beyond, Williams are looking to get themselves back towards the front of the grid, and that is what has convinced Carlos Sainz to join the team.
Pick for the win, who are we going for?
I was always going to say Lando Norris, and I'm going to stick with that despite the changing conditions.
Andrew?
It's wet. I'm going to say Verstappen, have to.
I would be inclined to agree, but we are just moments away then from finding out what will happen over the course of 58 laps. The rain is still coming down here in Melbourne. We're at Albert Park, which is kick-starting the opening round of the 2025 Formula One season. So many questions, so many storylines. Could this be the best season in Formula One history? Because of that, all the cars are lined up and ready to go on the grid. It's time for the Australian Grand Prix. As they lead away off the starting grid, it's Lando Norris on pole position and a McLaren front row lockout with the home hero Oscar Piastri alongside him. Max Verstappen starts in third, ahead of the Mercedes of George Russell. Then comes Yuki Tsunoda in the Racing Bulls, ahead of Alex Albon's Williams. The two Ferraris, Charles Leclerc goes from 7th, ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Pierre Gasly in the Alpine is 9th, ahead of Carlos Sainz, who rounds out the top 10. Then in his first qualifying session, it's Isaac Hadjar for Racing Bulls, who starts in 11th, ahead of Fernando Alonso, 12th. Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin is 13th, ahead of Jack Doohan. Then comes Gabriel Bortoleto in 15th. Kimi Antonelli will start from 16th. Nico Hulkenberg is 17th, ahead of Esteban Ocon. Then we'll have Liam Lawson in the Red Bull and Oliver Bearman going from the pit lane. But disaster already before we've got going on the full racing lap for Isaac Hadjar, the French rookie, as he peeled away from the grid. This is the sound on board the Racing Bull.
Oh dear.
And that's the sound of Hadjar putting his foot on the throttle, spinning the rear wheels, round he goes into the wall, and that rear wing is damaged, Mark.
It's game over, and what a disappointing way to start your Formula One career. It goes down as a driver error, it goes down as an inexperienced driver error. Yes, burying the throttle, you need to start spinning the rear tyres out to build temperature on conditions like this, but it just caught him out the way the car snapped around and spun around, changed direction. He became a passenger, hit the grass, and unfortunately his race is over before it's begun.
That's the voice of the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley. Alongside myself, Harry Benjamin, is the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. Rosanna Tennant is our eyes and ears on the ground. Good morning if you're just waking up back in the UK. It's good afternoon here in Melbourne, and if you're expecting that it's sunshine and hot temperatures, you are wrong. It is raining, the wind has picked up, and we've already got one car out of the race in the form of Isaac Hadjar and the Racing Bulls, crashing on the formation lap as we hope to get away. But what are the race controls options here, Mark? How do we go to start this race? Lando Norris is already filling up onto the start-finish straight, but because we've got Hadjar's car stranded there, they've decided to abort it.
It's an aborted start, which means everyone will return to the grid, but at that point they'll have a period of time which will be determined by the race director and race control, and that will be dependent on how long it takes to get that car cleared, and they'll effectively go back through that race start procedure again when race control decides they're ready to do so. So looks like on the plus side we are going to get a normal racing start as opposed to a safety car start, but we're going to have that delayed.
Does seem that way, doesn't it? Well, Hadjar is out of the car and looking rather forlorn. Rosanna, what more do you have?
Well, so are his team Racing Bulls. There were some arms around shoulders in the garage consoling each other. Isaac Hadjar has been the standout rookie so far this weekend, hadn't really put a foot wrong, so this is super disappointing for the French driver. And actually it's quite a few of the rookies have been making mistakes, haven't they, Harry? But it's Jack Doohan who's had the spotlight on him this weekend, who's managed to keep it clean, and so has F2 champion Gabriel Bortoleto coming into the Sauber. So a lot of the rookies getting it wrong this weekend, and now Hadjar is one of them.
It does feel like it has been a real tough start for the majority of the rookies, hasn't it? I suppose better to get it out of the way at the start.
But this is what you get when you have a field with so many rookies in it, and if you're a team that chooses to employ a rookie, you have to accept the risk of somebody getting things wrong is massively increased, because experience counts for a lot. And so yes, you get that raw pace that comes with some of these young drivers, you get that sort of naivety that can be a positive at times, but you also have to contend with inexperience, and in tricky conditions like this, which they'll have never experienced before, certainly not in a Formula One car, you've got to expect that things are going to go wrong.
Just seen another off-board replay of it, and he just looks like he's got no chance as he arcs through the left-hander of turn 2. Round goes the car into the tyre barrier. And we have also seen Hadjar out of the car. He's fine and talking to the marshals, waiting for a lift back, but it almost looks like he's crying. He's got his head down, helmet still on, and these rookies are so young as well that this is a lot to deal with on their way up to the pinnacle of the sport, but they have to learn from this and be ready to deal with it when it comes.
Well, you imagine that you put yourself in Hadjar's position. Yesterday, when everyone's talking about him being really quite good and having a great start to his campaign, the conversations inevitably will at some point start talking about, can he make his way up to the main team? What if Liam Lawson doesn't deliver? would they ever look to a youngster like Hadjar? And then just one day later he finds himself in the wall while everyone's making their way to the grid. This is Formula One. It can change in a moment, and you need to be on the right side of that.
And particularly more pressure than most, being a part of that Red Bull driver camp too, and you have the big team watching on when Liam Lawson has had such a struggled start to his first weekend. This is going to be weighing all on Hadjar's mind. Update from race control. We're going to get another formation lap. That will start at 3:15 local time, so in about 10 minutes time. So now all the cars are back onto the grid after that initial formation lap. They've stopped, they've lined up in their spaces, and now the mechanics and the engineers are allowed to go back to the cars and see to them before we get ready to go again. So well, we want to get this season started, Rosanna, but we're going to have to just wait that little bit longer.
Absolutely. Mechanics have been running from the hospitality areas in the paddock here at Albert Park Circuit back to the garages. Of course, the formation lap gives them a chance to get everything off the grid, maybe even just go to the loo quickly. So they've been kind of caught out here, people running to get back onto the grid to help their drivers back onto their grid spots. And also, do you remember what James Fowles said to me on the grid, Harry, that there was another weather front coming through? Ooh, will that coincide with the new start time? This could make things very, very tricky for people.
It certainly does. And also what happens though, we do knock off a lap. So we were 58 laps, we now go down to 57 when we get this race eventually started.
Yeah, and two things to note. One is that at the previous formation lap, Stroll in the Aston Martin was the only man on the grid to be on full wet tyres. They've now done that lap and he's assessed those conditions, and luckily I think for him he's now got the opportunity to change, and he's gone now onto the intermediate tyre, which joins what everyone else is doing. So that seemed like it was a bit of a gamble. It didn't look like it was going to pay off to me, and it seems like he now agrees with that. And the other is there is a new rule for this year where formation laps, if you're starting from the pit lane, and we've got two drivers in Lawson and Oliver Bearman who are starting the race in the pit lane, they now have to join that formation lap, so they won't benefit, which they would have done a year ago, by missing out on these two formation laps and effectively having 2 laps less to contend with. They now have to join the back of the field, complete the laps, and then still start from the pit lane when the race gets underway.
Thanks, Mark. Isaac Hadjar has made it back to the paddock, and he is just distraught with his helmet down. And Rosanna, I think he's walking towards you, is he?
I'm outside the Racing Bull hospitality area, and obviously that's opposite the garage. Some mechanics outside, engineers with their headphones down. I can't quite see him yet, Harry, but he's walking quite slowly from what I've just seen, but cameramen are running around trying to get a shot of the very disheartened French driver. As I said, it's been going so well for him this weekend, and Racing Bulls seem to have a great car underneath them, so there was huge potential for some big points right from the off to get 2025 going. I'm just trying to see where he is. Yes, here he comes. I wonder whether he's going to...
I'll tell you what, Rosanna, he's actually being consoled, I think, at the moment by Anthony Hamilton.
Yeah, Lewis's dad was on the grid earlier, taking a moment to soak it all in. Obviously his son in Ferrari. So the father figure lending a comforting hand and maybe a shoulder to cry on, quite literally, in the paddock. Let's see. Yeah, he's making his way very slowly. Helmet's still on. He is starting to unbuckle and unfasten it now, though. And I wonder whether he'll go into his driver room. Yeah, I can see him now.
Yeah.
Here we are. Still got his helmet on, holding his gloves, walking along with his manager. Right, yes, still helmet on. So I don't think we're going to be hearing from him in the media pen anytime soon.
Oh,
it's so
brave enough
difficult
to stick your microphone there, Rosanna.
Do you know what, Harry? It's so difficult. The world and his wife are walking around him. This is a problem, isn't it? You make these mistakes and the whole world is watching you. I don't know about you, but on my driving test, I made a few little errors. Only 2 of them. But no one was there putting it all over the headlines. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first Grand Prix in history, apparently, to feature 4 drivers under the age of 21. Hadjar being one of them, who is just 20 years old. The French media like to call him Le Petit Prost, but at the moment, well, they won't be calling him anything right now.
Ironically, Alain Prost also spun on a formation lap once in Imola in 1991, but he was sort of cut a bit of slack because he was already a 3-time world champion by then. As Isaac Hadjar, I'm sure, won't be seeing the parallels at this moment. Frankly, he made a complete hash of that, and that's why I think he's in such a state, because he realises the size of the error he's made, and the eyes of the world on him, and he's just absolutely gutted. You can see from his body language he definitely was crying. I'm sure here's some radio.
In 7 minutes we expect Class 1 lasting for 5 minutes. Class 1. Then there will be a 5-minute gap, and then 10 minutes of Class 1 again.
Formula One is back. We've put the rain in more classifications this year. That's Brian Bozzi at Ferrari talking to Charles Leclerc, explaining what they're seeing on the weather radar. Class 1 rain, they're expected, then a 5-minute gap, then perhaps some more rain of the Class 1 variety in 10 minutes. And Class 1, Mark?
Well,
I'm assuming what we've got now.
I don't know is the answer, because every team, denotes these things differently. Interestingly, Lewis Hamilton was talking about the way Ferrari presented their data to him compared to the way it looked at Mercedes, and he called it upside down, meaning that they were talking about things in a very different way, which is one of the challenges he's got to contend with this year. So I don't know what the Ferrari code Class 1 rain means.
Yeah, it's either really heavy or really
not heavy. Yeah. We'll work it out sooner rather than later. Everyone's a bit rusty for race 1. Now, if you are just joining us and waking up this morning in the UK, welcome to 5 Live's coverage of Formula 1. We should have been about 12 minutes or so into this race by now. However, the French rookie for Racing Bulls, Isaac Hadjar, on the formation lap, spinning out into the wall, has caused delay, and it's he span out and it's caused a delay in general because it is raining, it is wet, and it is windy in Melbourne, and a stark contrast to what we've had throughout the weekend so far, where it's been incredibly hot and dry. So we've had one formation lap, and then all the cars remaining, bar Hadjar, have made it back round to the grid, stopped, and now we are awaiting for a new formation lap to begin, which will happen in just under 4 minutes time, about 3:15 local time. We'll get back going for the formation lap. So what was a 58 lap Grand Prix is now down to 57. Every driver is on the intermediate tyre. There will be 18 cars on the grid, with Liam Lawson in the Red Bull and Oliver Bearman in the Haas starting from the pit lane. Guiding you through all the coverage is myself, Harry Benjamin. Alongside me is the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley and the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson.
I mean, on the Hadjar incident, I think it's worth pointing out that yes, he's made a hash of it, but what it underlines is just how difficult it is to drive a Formula 1 car in the wet. Yeah. The drivers make it look easy, or relatively easy, but they're on an absolute knife edge, and it's fractions of millimetres of throttle pedal travel between triumph and disaster. And when we're watching the next 57 laps, we're going to be watching some expressions of sublime skill and some mistakes inevitably. But that puts it into context what these drivers are facing.
Yeah, it's very true. They're very heavy, these cars, and so when you do start to go, start to spin in very slippery conditions, they can come around at you very, very quickly, to the point where it's difficult to catch them. And given the lack of experience that Isaac Hadjar clearly has with these cars in these conditions, he wasn't able to catch that one. So you're right, Andrew. I think what we are going to see is something pretty spectacular, particularly from those guys up front that do have the experience in how to manage these cars in these conditions.
Mark, now that Hadjar is out of the race, what happens to that slot of his on the grid?
Well, it will remain as a spare slot. Effectively, when they do come back from this formation lap and line up, there will be a gap. And actually it can catch people out, because if you were behind that gap on the first tour around ahead of the initial race start, the natural instinct is to go and fill the space in front of you. And we've seen that many times, drivers then getting penalties for being out of position on the grid. There is a little marker board, and that's the thing you have to refer to. There's a marker board with your car number. It shows you very clearly where you're supposed to stop. But that natural instinct is to go and just follow the car in front of you and slot in behind them.
And Andrew, when it comes to the tyres, people might be asking, well, if it's a full wet race and everybody's on the intermediate tyre, what does that mean for the strategy in changing tyres?
Well, we don't know, Harry, is the truth at the moment. They're going on the Inter because it's generally the sort of best compromise across a range of conditions. Interestingly, I was speaking to someone earlier, so were you in fact, Harry, that said that the extreme wet tyre has been improved for this year, which as races go on in the wet this year, we may see that might change the dynamics a little bit, but obviously the drivers all feel that the intermediate is the right tyre. By the way, just want to say a quick parenthesis, just see Stefano Domenicali, the Formula 1 CEO, coming out of the the Racing Bulls team area, he's obviously gone in to see Isaac Hadjar to try and cheer him up a bit and say, look, don't worry, mate, you get another chance. It happens to everyone.
Well, that's quite nice, actually, isn't it? There's clearly a full support, or they understand they need to support these rookies. A lot has been made of 6 rookies coming into the grid. Already seen Anthony Hamilton putting an arm round Isaac Hadjar, who has only had positive things to say about Lewis Hamilton so far, an idol of his, and now the CEO of Formula 1, who has actually in the build-up to this week signed on an extension to remain as the CEO of Formula 1, Stefano Domenicali, which is good news for the sport, and Lewis Hamilton making that clear in the press conference earlier on this weekend. Right then, the formation lap is now back underway, and we are going to get going in this race. Let me just run you through then how the grid looks. It's Lando Norris on pole position. It's a McLaren front row lockout with the home hero Oscar Piastri in second. Max Verstappen starts in third, ahead of the Mercedes of George Russell. Yuki Tsunoda, with an outstanding qualifying in the Racing Bulls, goes from fifth, ahead of an equally outstanding qualifying from the Williams of Alex Albon. Disappointing day for Ferrari yesterday. Leclerc and Hamilton go from 7th and 8th, ahead of Pierre Gasly's Alpine, and the Williams of Carlos Sainz. Isaac Hadjar will now no longer be a part of this race, so there will be a gap where 11th should be. Alonso will have then no one alongside him in 12th. Lance Stroll just behind him. Then comes Jack Doohan in 14th. Gabriel Bortoleto is 15th, ahead of Kimi Antonelli. Nico Hulkenberg Sauber is 17th, ahead of Esteban Ocon, who should be the last car on the grid, with Liam Lawson in the Red Bull and Ollie Bearman in the Haas starting from the pit lane. And so far on this formation lap mark, so good. No drivers are spinning out.
Yeah, let's hope that's not a commentator's curse, but yeah, you're right. So far they're all making their way around, and it will be a reminder to everybody what happened to Hadjar, that these are tricky conditions and there are patches of water around the circuit, so even the most experienced guys, that little wake-up call could be beneficial. They're tiptoeing their way round, but importantly we're going to get a proper race start in a moment, and I cannot wait for it.
Yeah, making their way around this circuit, which is just over 5.2 kilometres, 3.2 miles, made up of 14 turns, 9 to the right and 5 to the left. We'll have 57 laps of running. It'll be a short run down to the right-hander of turn 1 before they curve through turn 2, and then it's a straight down to the braking zone, the right-hander of 3 and 4. So there are some prime overtaking opportunities in this early part of the lap, if you dare, Mark. Yeah. Those are the main opportunities at the start of the lap.
Yes, but get any of those things wrong and the walls are incredibly close. This circuit bites if you make mistakes. We've seen it a couple of times already in the practice, in the run-up to this weekend. Everybody has got to be careful and balance risk against reward.
Rosanna Tennant down on the ground for us as Lando Norris begins to pull into his grid spot.
It's getting even cooler here, Harry. It was 17 degrees at the start of our show. It's dropped by a degree and it is incredibly windy. The rain, however, has stopped and those dark clouds have moved over. But as we've heard, there is still some light rain forecasted in the next few minutes. Will it come just as they start the Grand Prix? That is the big question.
Toto Wolff's arms are crossed as he sits in the Mercedes garage overlooking his new driver pairing for Mercedes. George Russell takes on the team leadership role. He'll start from 4th, while Kimi Antonelli, the rookie wonder kid after damage to his car in qualifying yesterday, goes from 16th. So many storylines coming into 2025. Lewis Hamilton will start his first race for Ferrari. 6 rookies in the field, experienced drivers moving teams, and it's a McLaren front row lockout. Piastri in second, Norris on pole. It's all eyes to the lights and foot to the floor for the first time in 2025, and it's a decent start from Oscar Piastri, but a better start from Verstappen, who'll go around the outside. He'll try and apply pressure on Lando Norris, who's able to hold the line and hold the lead. Coming through turn 2, Verstappen having to hound Oscar Piastri as they all now try and find their way through in the rundown to the right-hander of turn 3, and Verstappen has managed to split the 2 McLarens. The reigning champion gets himself up into second.
Yeah, it was a really good start actually from the McLaren on the front row. Lando Norris, the guy leading this race away, but Verstappen was all over him at the beginning. It was Piastri who managed to block him, and only as they got through the turns sort of 4, 5, 6 did Max Verstappen manage to find his way in front. It's now Lando Norris in front. He's got about 5 or 6 car lengths, and then it's Max Verstappen. We know how good he is in the wet here. This is a real opportunity for him, and that's a great start. And it's another crash.
Big contact there for the Alpine of Jack Doohan, who has made a mess in the run down to turn 6. That's brought out the yellow flag. Let's hear from him. Oh, we're not going to hear from him, but he said he's okay on the radio, and that is an immediate yellow flag turned to safety car. I was just about to say, it looked like everybody got through unscathed, and then the absolutely wrecked pink and blue Alpine with one of the home drivers of Jack Doohan in the car. His visor's up, he's moving around, but the rear end of that car and the front end have taken a hefty bit of damage, Mark.
This is becoming a brutal introduction to some of these young drivers to Formula One, isn't it? Another guy starting his first full season in Formula One, a home hero in Jack Doohan, and his race is over 1 lap after that of Isaac Hadjar, who didn't even make the start. So very difficult beginnings. We haven't yet seen a replay of that. Up at the front is Lando Norris, who's got things under control, but he does have Max Verstappen right behind him though.
Charles Leclerc made gains on that lap as well. He started in 7th and has managed to get ahead of both Albon and Tsunoda, getting up into 5th. This is the sound of Jack Doohan. He's following the Aston Martin in front of him on the way down to turn 6. Let's listen. And that's where he lost it, and again just applying that throttle and aquaplaned off.
It looked like it. We haven't yet seen if somebody touched him from behind, but the back end coming out of a corner where he was about to build on the throttle just snapped away. We'll see if we can get another shot to see if there was contact from anybody else, but it may well be.
Oh, another car in the wall. It's Carlos Sainz on his debut for Williams, the man who made way for Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari. The Williams team can't believe it. The mechanics have their head in their hands. Sainz is okay. It's on the exit of turn 14, the final corner. It looks like he's facing the wrong way. He's getting out of the car, and we're about to see how it happened, and I think it was under safety car conditions as well.
Oh, it was a similar thing, on the throttle too early, all on his own, just a lack of grip, spinning the rear wheels up, and like we've seen from other drivers, the car's just pirouetting so quickly, but this is an experienced driver. Here he is on the radio.
I had like a massive torque surge.
Okay, so what he's referring to there is, I mean, always take these things with a slight pinch of salt, because I've heard so many drivers on the radio when they do come up with a technical reason for what might otherwise be a driver error. A torque surge, he's talking about effectively applying the throttle and effectively getting a lot more throttle response when it comes to the engine and the drivetrain than he was expecting. So whether that's true or not, I mean, a similar feeling, you could experience something similar just through a lack of grip, and it might feel like a torque surge, but actually it's the wheels spinning up, and that's what throws you around. But look, Williams have replaced their driver lineup to bring in this very experienced Carlos Sainz for the very reason they don't want the car in the wall every couple of weeks. And here we are on the very first opening laps of the Australian Grand Prix, and they've got one in the wall again.
Last year's race winner at this very circuit in a Ferrari, now out. We've lost Carlos Sainz in the Williams, Jack Doohan in the Alpine, and Isaac Hadjar in the Racing Bulls. What is in the water this afternoon? And they're under safety car conditions because of those 2 incidents, and actually the Aston Martin safety car will lead them all through the pit lane, because Carlos Sainz's car is positioned on the outside of the final corner, the right-hander of turn 14. He's out of the car, he is okay, and we've done 2 laps of 57 so far. It's Lando Norris who leads. Max Verstappen with a good launch on the first lap, getting himself up into 2nd and splitting the Mclarens. Piastri down to 3rd, Russell holding on to 4th. Charles Leclerc with up 2 places to 5th, ahead of Tsunoda and Albon. Lewis Hamilton has stayed where he started in 8th. So too has Gasly. Alonso has made up ground up into 10th. So too is his teammate Lance Stroll. Nico Hulkenberg with a pretty fantastic start from 17th on the grid all the way up to 12th. Kimi Antonelli too from 16th on the grid up to 13th. Then comes Gabriel Bortoleto. Esteban Ocon is 15th, and then Liam Lawson and Ollie Bearman, who started from the pit lane, have joined up at the back, now 16th and 17th.
Yeah, Charles Leclerc just been on the radio to his engineers saying the track's drying up very quickly, which when the rain isn't falling, it does. These Formula One cars with their intermediate tyres disperse so much water. It's the best way to dry out a racing track, is to literally put racing cars on it. So we'll see. We're expecting more light rain, but it hasn't arrived just yet. And the longer it doesn't come down, the closer we're likely to get to something of a sort of dry line, maybe even only at certain parts of the racetrack. It's going to make some tyre decisions very tricky as this race goes on.
Just having a little look at the race start, and the 2 Ferraris coming oh so close in the middle of turn 1. Hamilton was the Ferrari behind, and I think erring very much on the side of caution, and just very much leaning off the throttle, and that lost him ground, which is why he stayed in 8th, and while Leclerc was able to make up positions. This is the sound on board Max Verstappen, Mark.
Well, he got a very, very good initial launch. He actually had to back out because the lead McLaren just blocked him, well within his rights to do so, but he had a much better launch off the line, actually, than the two McLarens, and only because he came very fast up behind the lead McLaren of Lando Norris did Verstappen have to then back off, which initially allowed Oscar Piastri back in front of him. But he's got such drive, such grip out of these corners in that Red Bull in these conditions that he was able to then drive past the second McLaren, putting himself into second place and a very good position to restart this race when we get back underway again.
And that's the remnants of Jack Doohan's Alpine sliding across. We haven't seen if he did maybe get a push. I don't think he did, but we haven't quite seen the full on board, and actually quite lucky that nobody else collected him behind, managing to get out of the way. But that's left an awful lot of debris on the track, and in the garage, his father, who is a motorcycle legend, a 5-time MotoGP champion, watching on, shaking his head, as we just also get another look at Carlos Sainz spinning out. That will be a tough one for Sainz to swallow, won't
it really will. And as Andrew said, you know, these conditions are very tricky. These cars are difficult to drive, and for somebody with the experience of Carlos Sainz, albeit in a new car, in a new team, where there are a lot of new things to learn on how to handle this particular machinery, that's still a little highlight of just how difficult it is. And we're right in between. We're not it's not talking about huge puddles of standing water at this point. It's just damp all over. But this is a racetrack that becomes very, very slippery as soon as you get any water on it. Tarmac just doesn't yield a huge amount of grip. So that just, I guess, proves how tricky it is.
Well, still under safety car conditions here in Albert Park. You're listening to live coverage of the Australian Grand Prix, the opening race of the 2025 Formula One season. We are on lap 4 of 57, but after incidents for Carlos Sainz's Williams and Jack Doohan's Alpine still being recovered from the circuit, we have had a couple of laps now under safety car after a delayed start as well on the initial formation lap. The rookie Isaac Hadjar in the Racing Bulls crashed, and that meant we had to stop for 15 minutes before we got going again. My name's Harry Benjamin. I'll be guiding you through the coverage. Alongside me is the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley. Also in the commentary box, which overlooks the end of the main straight, is the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson.
There's a recovery truck on the track just lifting Jack Doohan's car, or about to lift Jack Doohan's car up. It's worth putting his crash into some kind of context. He started this season under immense pressure because Flavio Briatore, the Alpine executive advisor, but effective team boss basically, signed Franco Colapinto, who people may remember made some debut appearances for Williams towards the end of last year. And the understanding within Formula One, here's Antonelli's radio.
From the replays, it looks like Doohan lost it on straight just by putting a wheel on the white lines, just to watch the painted lines.
Yeah, I almost did the same. So, yeah, they're quite slippery.
That's Antonelli's engineer, Pete Bonington, who people remember his voice from talking to Lewis Hamilton for so many years, explaining what happened to Jack Doohan, getting a wheel on the white lines and spinning, which Nigel Mansell famously did at Monaco in 1984 and lost the victory. Just back to Doohan. The understanding within Formula One was that Briatore was doing that with a view to replace Doohan after just a handful of races potentially with Colapinto, because of the money that he might bring in from Latin America. He's from Argentina, and he lots of interest from Latin American sponsors as a result of his appearances last year. So having that crash on the first lap of the first race of the season was just going to pile more pressure on Jack Doohan, who's been a bit tetchy in press conferences since he emerged first at the F175 event at the O2 in London in February, and also this weekend, whenever anyone's raised that. Understandably, you can see why he doesn't want to be reminded of that possibility.
We've got action down in the Red Bull pit lane. They're all driving through the pit lane as it is, and some are coming in. So too Esteban Ocon in the Haas, and they're changing the intermediate tyres for a set of new intermediate tyres. So too is the Red Bull of Liam Lawson, making his way out at about 2.5 seconds. So Ocon and Lawson then putting on fresh inters. Why would they do that so early? So too for the other Haas of Ollie Bearman.
Well, those are the last 3 cars in the train, so effectively they've got something of a free pit stop whilst they're behind the safety car, and so we don't know how long they're going to have to go on these tyres. The conditions are so changeable, and we've got this little threat of more light rain coming, but we're not really convinced that we're going to ever see dry racing, or maybe not until right at the very end. So we might have to do a very long stint on intermediate tyres. We've already done a few laps, albeit not at full racing speed, but the Inters don't like running on a drying track for very long. They overheat, they wear out quickly, so having a fresh set now might just enable you to extend your stint a little bit longer. And the only other point I want to just bring up is that little conversation about the painted white lines that Antonelli was having with his engineer. This is good to point out, this racetrack, in large parts of it, are actually normal public roads. Outside of a Grand Prix weekend, there is regular traffic flowing around them, and as such, they have the typical white painted lines that we are all familiar with.
It's covered in white lines.
Yeah, the streets, there's arrows on the road, there are dotted painted lines down the middle. And the difference here is that on the typical dark bitumen racetrack, you get an expected level of grip, something that's consistent. Is Norris.
Weather update, no significant rain expected for at least 30 minutes.
There you go, that tells you why those guys at the back have made that change to get onto the intermediates, just so they can run longer and longer as the track dries out. But these white painted lines, because you've got paint over the bitumen, when that paint gets wet, it can become very, very slippery. And some of those white lines are significant. You drop a wheel onto it, you don't have the grip you expect.
It's interesting though, already back on the main straight, Lando Norris, as soon as he came on, veered off the racing line, hugging the pit wall. So is that his searching for a damper part of the track to keep the tyres in shape?
Yeah, it's to keep them cool, effectively, because as the circuit dries, we get closer and closer to a dry line. We're nowhere near an actual dry line yet, but without water to keep the surface of those tyres cool, even behind the safety car at the speeds we're going, but particularly when we get racing, an intermediate tyre will overheat very quickly. It's got the tread, of course, albeit a shallow tread on an intermediate tyre, but that tread moves around, whereas a slick tyre just doesn't, and that moving around of the rubber really does overheat very quickly. So if you could search out wetter patches, it might keep the temperatures down a bit more.
Sound in the background you're hearing is the starts from Oscar Piastri, who, thought he might have a go at his teammate, then was slipping and sliding. Both Mclarens were just struggling to get their foot down with the grip, and as a result, Max Verstappen was able to sweep round the outside and split the two of them. That's how Verstappen got ahead at the start and currently sits in second. This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton's start, Mark.
Yeah, really good actually. Good initial launch. He got slightly balked with Williams just in front of him. Had to actually back off, but he could have done even better. Was then able to run around the outside of his own teammate, and as you rightly said, they came so close to touching. Hamilton eventually yielding and slotting in behind the Williams, initially getting back in front of him, but Lewis was able to get a good clean run down the outside. He did in fact tuck in down behind the Williams as they closed the lap out, but it was a really good solid strong start from Lewis. That launch was a really good phase in the Ferrari.
Yeah, it's lap 6 of 57 of the Australian Grand Prix, the season opening race of the Formula One calendar. It's Lando Norris who leads. Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri is third ahead of Russell. Then comes Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari fifth ahead of Yuki Tsunoda, and Alex Albon's Williams is seventh. Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari is eighth. Pierre Gasly ninth, with Fernando Alonso rounding out the point scorers in 10th. Lance Stroll, his teammate for Aston Martin, is 11th ahead of Hulkenberg Sauber. Kimi Antonelli is 13th. Then comes Gabriel Bortoleto in 14th ahead of Esteban Ocon's Haas, who has pitted for fresh inters. So too has the Red Bull of Liam Lawson and the other Haas of Oliver Bearman. Out of this race, 3 cars. Carlos Sainz in the Williams crashing out in the final corner under safety car conditions. Jack Doohan crashing on the way down to turn 6, touched the white lines and round the Alpine went out of the race. And on the initial formation lap, Isaac Hadjar in the Racing Bulls, the 20-year-old French rookie, sadly found his Racing Bull in the barrier round the outside and couldn't even start his first race as a Grand Prix driver. He was distraught walking back towards the paddock, whereas Anna Tennant is catching up with him.
Isaac, bad luck. It's so difficult out there. The challenge is huge. Just talk us through your emotions right now.
They're just embarrassed and sorry for the team. That's it.
Do you feel, though, that you have proved that you are a worthy F1 driver this weekend? I think everyone's been so impressed with your pace.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. It's not up to me to decide about how people think how good I am. I'm just gonna try and come back in China with less silly mistakes. Yeah.
Rosanna,
okay, understood.
Rosanna Tennant catching up with Isaac Hadjar then, the French rookie, one of 6 rookies in the field out of this race, along with the Alpine of Jack Doohan. Still the rookies in this race, Antonelli, Bortoleto and Liam Lawson, along with Ollie Bearman. Right, the safety car is ending. Bert Mailander in the Aston Martin car is escaping off to the pit lane, and that leaves Lando Norris with effective control over the remaining 17 cars that make up this Grand Prix. It's Norris ahead of Verstappen, then comes Piastri, Russell and Leclerc, the top 5. It'll be up to Lando Norris as to when he goes, and indeed I think he has already put the foot down as he arcs his way through the right-hander of turn 12, then the tight left-hander of 13, as we are back to green flag racing, struggling to get the grip though, coming out of 13 through the right-hander of 14, the final turn, back on to the start-finish straight, and we are back racing. It's lap 8 of 57 of the Australian Grand Prix, and Verstappen is hunting down Lando Norris, weaving from side to side, trying to find a bit of clear air and isn't being filled with spray from the water, manages to do so, and out of turn 1 Norris leads Verstappen, Piastri, Russell, Leclerc as they were.
Yeah, if there's anyone you don't want in your mirrors at a safety car restart in these conditions, it's Max Verstappen, but Lando did a really good job there of keeping things under control and getting his way through the first couple of corners, and now towards the end of the very first lap, in control, still in the lead of this race. Verstappen behind, twitching a little bit in these conditions still. It's very, very treacherous because we're drying the track as we go round more and more, but it's nowhere near actually being dry. There's still a lot of water, and if you step offline, if you take the risk to make an overtake, you leave that drying section of the racetrack and you get back into very, very wet, slippery conditions.
Nice battle brewing just behind the top 5. Yuki Tsunoda is holding on to 6th, but is feeling pressure from the Williams of Alex Albon, and behind them is Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari, desperate to try and keep up with the front-running cars, but out of turn 10 is Max Verstappen under a bit of pressure here, because he's fallen back slightly from Norris into the clutches of the home hero Oscar Piastri, who just has to settle in behind as they come through the right-hander of turn 11, followed immediately by another one arcing through 11 and can't find a way through there. They won't get DRS in these conditions, the drag reduction system, which gives you about a 7/10 of a second advantage when you're within a second of the car in front. You can activate that button and the rear wing will fly open as we start lap 9 of 57. Norris leads, a little look into his right-hand mirror before he brakes for turn 1. Verstappen not able to mount anything there. Piastri follows in 3rd. Russell, Leclerc 5th. Tsunoda, Albon, Hamilton, Gasly and Alonso the top 10. No other major moves going on as we get this race restarted.
We just had a note from race control on the screen saying that they've noted a safety car infringement from Fernando Alonso, who's chasing that pack of Tsunoda, Albon, Hamilton and Gasly for 6th place, which Tsunoda occupies at the moment. We don't know what that infringement might have been, if indeed there was one, but they're certainly looking into it at race control.
As they weave their way down towards turn 6, we are in what is essentially a public park. There is a lot of greenery, a lot of shrubbery and a lot of trees still overlooking this circuit. Lots of foliage which gets scattered onto this track and makes it dirty. It gets cleared out of the way when the F1 cars come running. And another safety car infringement as well for Yuki Tsunoda. That's also been noted by race control, so we'll keep you up to date with that as Lewis Hamilton, the sound you're hearing now, navigates his way through the left-right sweeper of 9 and 10, chasing down Alex Albon, who had just had a little twitch coming out of the corner. Up front though, Lando Norris still leading, but that gap coming down 0.3 of a second. Verstappen is stalking him and closing in.
Verstappen is pushing like crazy, his car twitching as he desperately tries to get that throttle buried. Coming through the final corner to start another lap now, and he's twitching all the way around, which shows just how much he's desperate to close down the McLaren of Lando Norris. Less than half a second between them now, 0.3 Verstappen underneath the rear wing of Lando Norris, and in certain parts of this racetrack we're getting the very first glimpses of some drying sections. It's nowhere near the dry tyre crossover point yet, but there are sections that are going to start delivering a lot more grip.
I think Norris was able to get a much better drive out of that final corner, and that Verstappen couldn't catch up. It went from 0.3 to 0.6 of a second, so Norris feeling confident then out of that final corner on the main straight, but perhaps Verstappen is stronger throughout the final sector leading up to there.
So the safety car infringements, I've just had a word from the FIA, are for leaving more than the requisite 10 car lengths to the car in front. I mean, it's all about keeping the pack closely packed together, but they're obviously looking at the fact that Alonso and Tsunoda were too far behind the car in front of them.
Tsunoda, that has been upgraded to under investigation now, not just noted. Interestingly, Alonso's hasn't, only Tsunoda's has so far, so we'll keep you up to date when we hear that from race control.
Alonso's was as
well.
well.
It was as well, okay.
Well, and funnily enough, I noticed that myself when I was watching that final lap behind the safety car. I actually thought Oscar Piastri might have been in danger of that. He fell a long way behind the second car of Max Verstappen. There's been no investigation into him at this point, but it felt like there were some large gaps forming, and so it's proved.
Lap 10 of 57. You're listening to 5 Live's coverage of the Australian Grand Prix, the opening race of the season, and 10 laps in, and we're already down to 17 cars. Carlos Sainz in the Williams, Jack Doohan in the Alpine, and Isaac Hadjar in the Racing Bulls, all crashing out of this race before we really even got started after a formation lap that we had to abort and start again. Then, on lap 1 of the restart, a crash for Doohan and Sainz, both on the same lap, brought out the safety car for multiple laps before we get going again, and that brings us up to speed with where we are. Lando Norris leads and has the fastest lap as well, feeling confident. 1.1 seconds the gap between himself and Max Verstappen. However, it is drying and they are seeking more and more the wet stuff off the racing line.
Yeah, and this is a nightmare for a Formula One team, because what happens here is as this track starts to dry, you're keeping half an eye on a weather forecast that says there may be more rain coming. Do you make a pit stop because you get very much more grip on a slick tyre when it is dry, but in these conditions it's way too risky for the front runners to make that kind of call. Maybe it could be that someone further down the back might start to consider a gamble at some point soon. Maybe still a bit early for anyone yet, but those are the kind of risks you can afford to take when you're disappearing well out of the picture at this stage, because those gambles, like any gamble, could just pay off.
Max Verstappen really having to drive off the line, coming in the rundown to turn 11 to find a wetter patch of the tarmac, still lurking in Norris's mirrors, but has fallen back slightly. Piastri third, Russell then a couple of seconds adrift from the top 3, Leclerc in 5th, still under investigation for safety car infringements are the likes of Yuki Tsunoda, who is in 6th, and Alonso is down in 10th. Here's Leclerc.
Main tyre to cool down, front left.
Too many information. If you can leave me to it a little bit more.
Too much information, you can leave me to it a bit more. That's the feedback from Charles Leclerc when told to cool his front left tyre by his engineer.
Yeah, so the front left is the one that takes most punishment around this, given that it's a clockwise circuit. So as you turn the car right and the weight transfers to the left-hand side, it's the left-hand side tyres that take most of that loading going through it. So that's the one you want to cool. It's all very well Charles Leclerc saying leave me alone, but the team have all of this information to hand and they can see what the predicted result of not dealing with that is, so they have to give him some information. He's just got his mind very much focused on trying to hunt down the Mercedes of George Russell, who's a couple of seconds in front of the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc right now.
Outside of the top 10 lies Lance Stroll in 11th, who's got Nico Hulkenberg for company in the Sauber in 12th, who in turn is being chased by Kimi Antonelli, the rookie who steps into the shoes of Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes, hunting him down. And now Race Control have enabled DRS, the drag reduction system, and 4 zones around this circuit. When you're within a second of the car in front, you are able to hit your DRS button and get an extra 7/10 of a second in terms of outright speed. As long as you hit that button, your rear wing flap flies open. Interestingly, last time around, Piastri has just gone fastest, and he is within that 1 second to close up to the back of Max Verstappen. Can he do the unthinkable for the Australians in the home crowd, who have never seen an Aussie on the top step of the podium, indeed on the podium in Formula One in the Melbourne Grand Prix? Currently lies in 3rd, closing in on Verstappen, but still has a little way to go yet.
The trouble is, in these conditions, closing down is one thing, getting past is something very different. Because of what I said earlier, a dry line forming, almost like a tram track through the middle of the racetrack. You step off that and the grip levels are vastly different. Not just a little bit, but vastly different. If you find yourself on those bits in the braking area, you're in trouble.
Let me know where I'm slow. Struggling with drivability. Car snappy.
11, 12.
That was Lewis Hamilton being told where he is slow. Turns 11 and 12. Nice, short, sharp, concise message from his engineer, Riccardo Adami, as he currently tries to keep up with Albon and Tsunoda, who are in 6th and 7th. Hamilton lies in 8th. He's got a bit of a gap behind him, a couple of seconds to Pierre Gasly's Alpine, so he's not got too much pressure from behind, but is desperately trying to keep close contact with those ahead of him.
We're in a really interesting phase here because we are very much now starting to see the beginnings of this dry line. Certain parts of the racetrack on the racing line, very, very dry, bone dry in patches, but it is only patches. And if we were to get a safety car at this stage in the race, let's hear from Norris.
In 6 laps time, there's possibly 1 lap of Class 1 rain, general rain risk increasing.
Well, there you go. So that's a little weather report from Lando's engineer into the cockpit of the car. 1 lap's worth of very light Class 1 rain. That's not really enough to worry about. That's just some general information for the driver. Of course, it'll be able to cool the cars down, the tyres down a little bit, but it will also lessen this impact that I was just about to talk about, this dry line forming. If you get a safety car around this phase, the teams have a very difficult decision to make. Do you go for a relatively cheap pit stop if you think it's going to remain dry for the rest of the race and go onto a dry tyre? As I said, the guys at the back may be more willing to take that risk, but as we've just heard there, it could be that the risk of rain is increasing and therefore you just can't afford to take a risk like that, and it's going to be intermediates probably for some time more.
And this is the problem for the drivers. We've seen for a number of laps now Max Verstappen seeking out a wetter part of the track between turns 10 and 11, try and keep those tyres temperatures under control. And so that's the sort of indicative of the fact that the track is drying, but with rain there he is doing it again. In fact, on this lap, as he closes in a little bit on Lando Norris, the top 3 running nose to tail at the moment. But of course, with more rain coming, the question is, pit stops, fresh tyres, used tyres, what are you going to do?
At some points, these intermediate tyres, they're going to have to come in for a change. Here's Hamilton.
Can you K1, you close? Into it, please. K1 available? Yes, I know. Leave me to it, please.
Well, both Ferrari drivers wanted to be left to it then for a little while. That's how hard they're pushing in the 2 Scarlet Ferrari. Charles Leclerc 5th, Lewis Hamilton down in 8th. But as Andrew just said, the top 3 really are nose to tail at the moment on lap 15 of 57, struggling to find a way past each other. The rain is expected to generally increase over the course of the next 10 minutes or so, and that's the predicament these drivers had. Starting on these intermediate tyres, there is a dry line forming, and these tyres will be starting to wear the drier it gets. But will the rain be significant enough to continue to stay out, or do they risk it and come in for a fresh set of intermediates, as those at the back have done, with nothing to lose? The 3 drivers at the back, Ocon, Lawson and Bearman, have taken advantage of that. And taking advantage further back too is Kimi Antonelli, the Italian rookie at Mercedes, who started down in 16th, has just overtaken Nico Hulkenberg to get himself up into 12th. And the top 3, Mark, I feel like they've closed in on each other in the last half a lap.
Well, I was just saying earlier on, wasn't I, that the getting closed up is one thing and the overtaking is another. Kimi Antonelli has just shown it's definitely possible, moving off the dry line onto the wetter stuff, but keeping the car nicely under control to sail past the Sauber of Nico Hulkenberg, with his DRS helping him along the way. So if he can do it, well, then some of these top 3 guys, they might also decide it's worth the risk to try and get in front.
Sound of Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time champion, who has made the move to Ferrari with his yellow helmet adorned with a red 44 on the top, is seeking an 8th World Championship in this new team. Currently, though, he's still getting to know the team, getting to know the car, and right now getting to know the back end of the Williams in front of him in Alex Albon, as he can't quite find a way through and is trying to find that wetter line as he races down in 8th.
It's worth saying, by the way, Harry, there's less than 2 seconds between the top 3. Norris just over a second ahead of Verstappen. He's only got half a second on Piastri, but they're nearly 10 seconds ahead of George Russell in 4th place. It's completely in a race of their own, the top 3.
Yeah, there is quite a gap, isn't there, to George Russell, kind of on his own, racing around in 4th. The battle at the front still rages. Norris, Verstappen, Piastri, the top 3. Then it's Russell, Leclerc, comes Tsunoda in 6th. followed by Albon. Then it's Hamilton, Gasly and Alonso the top 10. Then comes Stroll. Hulkenberg is now back up into 12th ahead of Kimi Antonelli. So I wonder if Antonelli has either had an issue out there on the circuit, he's still making his way around, or has the Sauber managed to get back past? We're just seeing a replay of Antonelli into the right-hander of turn 4. Are we going to see a spin for Antonelli? We are. He dips a wheel onto the grass, much like his teammate George Russell did in the practice sessions earlier this weekend. Thankfully for Kimi Antonelli, he's able to keep it out of the wall and keep going, and he loses one spot as a result.
Yeah, well, slippery though this racetrack is, it's nowhere near as slippy. There's a bit of wet grass just to the right-hand side, as he was right there. So he's found the limit and stepped just over it. Luckily not hitting any walls, a little bit of runoff space, which isn't the case all the way around this racetrack. Some of the walls are very, very close, and you do that somewhere else, you find your race is very quickly over.
Antonelli now down to 13th ahead of Gabriel Bortoleto. Esteban Ocon is 15th ahead of Liam Lawson, who's not really been able to make up any ground from the pit lane. Has had an additional pit stop too, along with Ollie Bearman, who is down in 17th. No Carlos Sainz in the Williams. He span out in the final corner on lap 1. No Jack Doohan, who crashed on the way down to turn 6 in the Alpine. And no Isaac Hadjar, who spun in turn 1 and hit the barrier on the exit, and that was his race done before it even began. And we just had Max Verstappen run deep and allow Oscar Piastri through. Piastri's up to second, and now the McLarens are back in front. Verstappen with a mistake there in the run down to the right-hander. I think that was turn 10, and just going straight on. He's rejoined in third, but was that an uncharacteristic mistake from Max Verstappen? Is he struggling with the tyres? He hasn't lost too much ground, but it's enough to lose a position.
Yeah, and position is really everything at the moment. For all we just talked about the difficulty of overtaking, we didn't see the beginning of Max Verstappen's move there, but it looked like maybe he locked a wheel going into the braking zone, and that pushed him very, very wide over the curb, splashing through puddles. We're getting a replay of it right now. Piastri was getting closer and closer and closer, pushing him all the way. Verstappen goes into the braking zone and jumps on the brakes, and I suspect locked up the front brakes of the car. The car just sailed straight on beyond his turning point, and that allowed Oscar Piastri a free pass to move himself up into second place. And McLaren back where they started this race with the front 2 cars in the Grand Prix.
Yeah, it was down into that 90-degree right-hander of turn 11 coming out of turn 10. How are these conditions though, Rosanna? What are we seeing develop out on the circuit?
Harry, the rain has arrived. The umbrellas are going up in the paddock. The ponchos are being put on. People are trying to cover up some of the equipment that they've already brought out of the garages, ready to head to China next weekend. It is really raining here at Albert Park Circuit.
Thanks, Rosanna. Another message from Race Control just popping up for Lewis Hamilton. Another safety car infringement which has been noted. Still no action from Tsunoda's or Alonso's, which are both under investigation. And Alex Albon now under investigation for a safety car infringement. I should say noted for an infringement, not yet under investigation. Albon currently desperately trying to keep the Ferrari of Lewis Hamilton behind him.
I tell you what I think happened at the safety car restart was that Lando Norris went very early in the lap and burst away. Of course, Verstappen close behind him, he chased him, he followed. Piastri got slightly caught out and the gap became large, and I suspect as you go down the field, everybody on that final lap before the safety car came in got caught out. The gaps became longer than that 10 seconds that's allowed, and that's what resulted in these little notes being put up by Race Control.
Yeah, there's so many drivers under investigation for the same thing all in a row. I suspect that nothing's going to end up happening over this probably. I could be wrong, of course. It's the FIA, you never know what they're going to do.
There'll be a long queue outside the Race Control this evening once we get to the checkered flag of Race 1. Formula 1 well and truly back in action, isn't it? Here's Verstappen's radio.
If there's something right, you might need to pit for new. Bear in mind, we would currently lose positions for doing that. Max, we're expecting the weather to start clearing in 10 minutes, if you can hold on.
So that's a conversation between Verstappen and Giampiero Lambiase, his engineer, about the state of his tyres. What he's saying there is his tyres are so warm that if it rains again, they're effectively slicks. He might need to come in for more inters, and that's the consequence of that, or the impact of that, is really quite large, because what that's saying is that the McLarens are looking after their tyres better than the Red Bull is, so that could have a play all the way through the rest of the race. That's actually what we were seeing in qualifying as well, in the dry conditions. the McLarens could keep their tyres in better condition, so they weren't overheating so badly through the final sector, and that was decisive in the fight for pole position as well.
Lap 20 of 57 of the Australian Grand Prix. Lando Norris leads Oscar Piastri. Max Verstappen down to third after a mistake, locking up into the right-hander of turn 11. Russell is fourth ahead of Charles Leclerc's Ferrari. Tsunoda, Albon and Hamilton locked in a fight for 6th, 7th and 8th. Then comes Gasly and Alonso, rounds out the top 10. They are your point scorers. Then it's Stroll. Antonelli's back up ahead of the Saubers in 12th. Hulkenberg 13th, his teammate Bortoleto 14th. Liam Lawson, who started from the pit lane and also made an additional pit stop, has now been able to get in front of the Haas of Esteban Ocon, who has done the same thing, pitted an additional time. He's in 16th. And Ollie Bearman, so far so good for Bearman after a disaster of a weekend so far, crashing out in FP1, not getting out in FP2, beaching the car in the first part of FP3 as well. So Lawson then ahead of Ocon and Bearman. No Carlos Sainz, no Hadjar and no Jack Doohan, and we've just seen a replay of Liam Lawson getting past Ocon into the fast left-right sweeper of turn 9 and 10, running a bit deep and putting a wheel onto the grass and nearly losing the car, and that allowed him to get the undercut, the undercut back, but he still managed to hold on to that position. Let's head down to Rosanna.
Harry, I just wanted to cast your mind back to Turkey 2020. We'll stop the radio.
A bit of an update. If there was a safety car, we think we would currently stay out on this set. This set is moving towards intermediate.
Agreed.
If it rains more, we'd have to change.
Yeah, if it rains more, we change. If it stays like this, we're fine.
So they are mentioning exactly what I was going to say. That was Will Joseph on the radio to Lando Norris. Do you remember Lewis Hamilton managed to wrangle 50 laps out of the intermediates in Turkey to take the race win and actually the championship that year and turn them really into slick intermediates? Is it too much to ask of these intermediates to go the whole way to the finish line?
Wow, I mean, if anyone can, maybe Lewis can, but I think we're going to have to see how the rain intensifies in the various classes, aren't we? It's a long way to go still. Only lap 21 of 57 to get to the very end. And in Melbourne, the rain is the weather in general is generally unpredictable. It can change from one end of the spectrum to the other within about half an hour.
Yeah, and it's what makes race strategy so difficult on a day like today. You can have all the simulations in the world, all the predictions, you can come up with as many plans as you like. But at the end of the day, when you're in the midst of the heat of battle like this, you just have to sort of look out the window and judge what's happening in front of you. As the rain starts to fall, as it intensifies, as it lessens, it changes everything about your plan. You've got to be reactive as much as anything else on days like today. So the strategists up and down the pit lane will be on the edge of their seats right now.
Nice, another fight developing for the finer points paying positions in the form of 9th place. Pierre Gasly, who has got Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin all over the back of him, down through the gears into the right-hander of turn 11, then back onto the throttle before he slightly eases off. Coasts it through 12, and then you slam on the brakes at a slight angle as you chuck it into the tight left-hander of 13. The pit lane entry to your right to carry on the circuit as Alonso does. You swoop round the outside of it, and you're back onto the main straight. He will get he won't get the effect of DRS on this occasion. He'll have to try and use a bit of the toe to close up to Gasly, who holds onto that position for now.
Yeah, so the two McLarens looking very, very strong right now and pretty much under control. The gap now between the two McLarens, between Piastri and third place Verstappen, out to about 8 seconds, which is huge. So the two McLarens pulled away considerably in these conditions. We heard Max Verstappen talking about his tyres just starting to drop away. Now all eyes are on the skies, waiting to see what's going to happen with this weather. The rain just starting to fall. How intense is that going to be? How long is it going to go on for? And how is that going to impact the tyres that are on these cars right now? Is anyone going to be brave enough to start thinking about a pit stop?
So we've been talking about tyre condition on the leading cars, and basically what affects tyre condition is downforce. The more downforce you have, the better able you are to keep your tyres in good condition because they slide less. So that works in the dry and it works in the wet. And it's also going to work for McLaren if they're running on sort of slicky intermediates, if you like, with the treads wearing down. Here's Hamilton's radio as he chases Albon.
Last gear sync.
Understood. We suggest be big free.
That's Hamilton saying he's lost gear sync, being given a possible solution, but he's really closed up onto the back of Alex Albon as they now come through the final corner. Let's see what the drive is like for Hamilton with the aid of DRS. That rear wing flap flies open and loses actually a little bit of ground to Albon's Williams. They run down to turn 1. So a possible gear sync issue, Mark. What does that mean?
Well, he's talking effectively, in simple terms, it's how smoothly the gears synchronise with each other. So as he goes down the street, down the racetrack, you're not hitting the clutch pedal like you would in a regular road car. You're just pulling a paddle on the steering wheel, and almost seamlessly, you should have a seamless shift between one gear and the next. He's talking about the fact that might have just drifted out of synchronisation, and the resultant solution that he was told on the radio there was a switch position that he could make on his steering wheel that might just resort back to a sort of default setting. It may be a compromise, but it might end up being better than what he's got right now.
Well, still down there in 8th is Hamilton, really getting to know the rear wing of Alex Albon. Tsunoda is able to actually get up the road ever so slightly. About a corner ahead is the Japanese driver in the Racing Bull, having a strong start to his 2025 campaign is Tsunoda, who has got a point to prove this year, having missed out on the Red Bull promotion to Liam Lawson. They're still squabbling though behind them. Hamilton really closes up in the rundown to turn 11 with the aid of DRS. Then has a little look to the inside, but Albon sees him coming, and then it's quite difficult to find an overtaking point until you get back round to the start-finish straight. But it does feel like, well, based on last lap around, that Albon gets a better drive out of the final corner. We'll have another go at it for Lewis Hamilton. Here he comes with the DRS. Albon looking in his mirrors to see where the 7-time champion may be, but he can't close up enough to try and dive down the inside of Albon. We'll have to settle for another lap behind the Thai driver.
Yeah, and out of the front, the two Mclarens are in such good condition right now. They're pulling further and further away from Verstappen, which will just give them the option, should we end up with a safety car situation, should we end up with a rain coming down that necessitates a pit stop, or even if they just want to decide to go for a pit stop in a few laps' time from a strategic point of view, they're giving themselves enough of a buffer to their main rival, Verstappen in the Red Bull. They'll give them the freedom to make that a lot easier than they would have done when Verstappen was right underneath the rear wing of Piastri.
Lando Norris still out in front, and this is impressive form, isn't it, from the McLarens, who as soon as the Red Bull made the mistake have managed to pull over 11 seconds on Max Verstappen. If you're just waking up back in the UK, you're listening to live coverage of the opening race of the 2025 Formula One season here in Australia. We're in Melbourne at Albert Park, and well, we've had sunshine and heat all weekend long until today, where the heavens had opened and the rain is falling down, and it's lap 25 of 57. After we initially tried to get away with the formation lap, we had a spin from the rookie of Isaac Hadjar, who crashed into the wall, so we had to wait while that car was cleared to get another go at it.
Is there a leakage?
A leakage of what?
I have the seat full of water, like full of water.
Must be the water.
Let's add that to the weather office now.
That's Charles Leclerc talking to Brian Botzi, and it sounds like Leclerc is sat in a bucket seat of water at the moment. Why? Another one to add to the wise words of wisdom from the Ferrari pit wall for Charles Leclerc, who's currently in 5th. Just so you know, we've only got 17 cars left in this race at lap 25. We had to have another formation lap. Then we got underway, a normal standing start with the rain still coming down. But on that first lap, both Jack Doohan in the Alpine and Carlos Sainz on debut in his new Williams team, both having crashes, both out of this race. Then that led to several laps under the safety car before we finally got away, and it's Lando Norris who leads now from his teammate Oscar Piastri after Verstappen made a mistake going in the rundown to turn 11, locking up, and those tyres were on intermediate tyres, screaming for more wet weather, which it's not currently getting at the moment enough of, with the track drying out. Verstappen now down to 3rd, then comes Russell in 4th. Quite a gap between Russell and Verstappen. Indeed, the McLarens are now pulling away from the Red Bull. Leclerc is 5th. Best of the rest at the moment goes to Tsunoda's Racing Bulls ahead of Albon. Hamilton is currently in 8th, chasing down the Thai driver. Gasly and Alonso round out the point scorers.
The two McLarens pulling away at quite some rate now. The gap between Piastri and Verstappen is nearly 13 seconds. So about a second a lap, they're still pushing and pulling away from Verstappen, who has no answer to them. By the way, just before that, I wanted to refer back to it. That was one of the best radio exchanges I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I love that. Why is there water in the seat? Well, it must be the water. I suspect...
Or the rain?
I don't think there's going to be a leak. If there was that much water leaking out of somewhere else in the car, like the engine, first of all, the engine would have blown up by now. And so I suspect it is just rainwater collecting somewhere in that car. Or Charles Leclerc needed the toilet a little bit earlier and didn't quite make it.
Well, let's hope it isn't that. But the sardonic nature of his response
Right.
makes me think that him and Brian Botts have been having a conversation about the effectiveness or otherwise of his race engineer's instructions, doesn't it?
Well, look, Brian Botts came in sort of the middle of last year to replace Leclerc's old engineer, who they did have some heated exchanges over the radio, but we do hear heated exchanges, particularly with the likes of Verstappen and his engineer, Jean-Pierre Lambiase, but it's because they have such a good, strong relationship that they're able to be, well, quite blunt with each other. But I am imagining right now Charles Leclerc sitting in a bucket of water, swishing around every time he turns into a corner.
Well, it can't be comfortable, can it?
The thing is, he's been driving in Formula 1 cars in the wet for like 7 years now. He knows the amount of water that should be in his seat. If he feels like he's sitting in a bath, he's obviously going to think something's wrong, isn't he?
I'd be keeping him nice and cool.
I mean, the other, just to sort of give him a real possibility, it could be that the drinks bottle has leaked into the seat. It's normally mounted somewhere in and around the seat, so that's another possibility. But either way, the exchange hilarious. Just looking at Verstappen, he's in a sort of a world of his own right now, 14 seconds behind the two McLarens up front, who are in a league of their own. He's in himself nearly sort of 8 seconds or so ahead of the chasing George Russell in the Mercedes. So Verstappen needs something to happen here if he wants to have an impact on this race. Either he needs a torrential downpour of rain, something to spice it up, he needs a safety car, he needs something to change things up, because at the moment McLaren have this completely under control as a team. McLaren's biggest challenge might be what they do with their two drivers. How do they manage these two very hungry drivers who already, you can bet your bottom dollar, will have half an eye on that this could be an opportunity for a world championship. Even though we're on day one of a season, they will be thinking about that, make no mistake, and neither of them wants to finish second today, so that could be something that McLaren needs to keep an eye on.
Well, Lando Norris has been thinking about that since the last race of last year, hasn't he?
True.
So remember what he said, this next year's my year.
Yeah, he did, true.
But it is Piastri at the moment who is the one cutting into Lando Norris's lead. 1.2 seconds the gap as it currently stands. Thus, Piastri also has the fastest lap, although Norris is responding. Here's Hamilton.
To avoid the denied DRS, we suggest upshift and then DRS.
Please leave it. Yes, leave it. I'm running the car as we go, mate. Just leave me to it with the DRS. It's not an issue.
Lewis Hamilton then just wants to be left to it. He's learning the car as he goes. He learns by doing, not by being told.
Well, and also, but that's an important part of learning the relationship between the two. You know, Pete Bonington and Lewis Hamilton had worked together for years. They knew exactly, intuitively, what the other needed, what they wanted, and so you didn't get so many of these kind of interactions. So this is just to be expected. They're building a relationship. They're understanding what each other is able to offer the other party in that little mini team, and it will just gradually form over time.
Oh, a little moment for Kimi Antonelli, just coming over the bump at turn 4 and having to correct his Mercedes. Antonelli is not quite into the points yet, having started down in 16th. Had an issue in qualifying yesterday, bit of damage to his car, and has since been steadily working his way up, and now in 11th behind Fernando Alonso. The battle for the lead, though, continues to rage on between the two McLarens, and Piastri feels like he's turning up the wick a little bit on this final lap, and you know what? They're going to have a bit of traffic to contend with as well, in the form of the Haas of Ollie Bearman, as they make their way through turn 5. There is a definite dry line forming, those tram lines that we've become so used to seeing when it goes from wet to dry, aiding these cars in their direction, but not aiding the tyres and able to stay cool and keep the temperatures. Norris, Piastri, the gap, less than a second.
Yeah, this could get heated here. So Lando Norris sails through. In fact, they both sail through. Ollie Bearman duly getting out the way under blue flags, moving out the way. So no issue for the two McLarens on this lap around. But it is Piastri who's the man with pace right now. The fastest lap of the race as well, less than a second. So in that DRS range and closing down on his teammate. And as we said a moment ago, this will not be all friendly. This will be elbows out. Both of them want to get to the front. Don't forget Oscar Piastri in front of his home crowd. Can you imagine the roar if he was able to get past Lando Norris in a few laps' time?
An Australian has never won their home Grand Prix in Formula One, and Oscar Piastri could become the first man to do that. DRS Open gets so close to the back of Norris into the braking zone of turn 1. They've got more traffic now in the form of the other Haas of Esteban Ocon as they now make their way down the short blast towards the right-hander of turn 3. Piastri closes in once more under braking. Tricky to find a place to overtake though in this middle sector of the lap. The rear end of Lando Norris looking a little bit shaky as he tries to put the throttle down. Piastri keeping a cool and level head. We know that's his personality trait, really helped with Mark Webber analysing and advising him in the background. The man who famously said not bad for a number 2 driver, Piastri wanting to make it clear that he will not settle for that label either.
Yeah, okay, so we've just gone past the halfway mark now. 30 laps out of 57. Originally, of course, it was 58. Here's Piastri.
We should hold position, please. Hold position. Transition to the dry. Clear the back markers. Next one is Ocon.
I mean, I'm faster, but okay.
Already a hold position, but is there some method to that madness in the transition to the dry? They don't want to try anything that might cause them drama while the conditions are still a little bit tricky.
Yeah, it's very sensible from a team perspective, but if you're Oscar Piastri, this is your opportunity. This is the moment when he's got more pace than his teammate. At other points in the race, when they've got new tyres on or there's different conditions, it might be Norris who ends up finding form. So you're not going to want to sit back and just hold that position, albeit good for the team. This is the moment you need to capitalise on.
What's interesting though is Lando Norris has just set fastest lap, as if he's saying, look, I can go faster, you know, I'm managing the tyres, we're running these inters down to slicks, we don't know when we're going to have to change it, the dry line is emerging, we've got to make the tyres last who knows how long, I'm pushing only as hard as I need to, I've got it under control, is the message he's trying to say with that fastest lap he's just done.
Yeah, is Lando Norris just holding Piastri at bay and keeping what he has got in the tank to make sure he lasts the full distance. Lap 31 of 57 of the Australian Grand Prix, the season opener ahead of 24 races of this 2025 FIA Formula One Championship, where we have had storylines galore in the build-up. So many questions to ask. The first of them being, well, are McLaren the team to beat? And how will they manage their driver dynamic? And that right now is unfolding right before us.
Try to hold the K1. That's called practice. I know it's difficult.
I'm not close enough.
Copy.
I'm not close enough. Now we're close, I'll do it.
Understood.
So it's Hamilton being told to try to hold the K1, which is obviously some sort of setting within that Ferrari wheel to give him perhaps a bit more of overtake.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say. It's exactly what it is. It's some kind of overtaking mode is what they're saying, because they were talking about it in the context of the DRS and Albon and chasing right behind him, and he's saying, I don't need it right now, I'll look at it when I get into the position to do so.
Hamilton and his engineer learning all the time how to communicate with each other, as well as Hamilton learning how this car operates. Of course, he's never driven the Ferrari in these kind of wet conditions before, so that is jumping in at the deep end as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's an awful lot to learn, and he's playing it out for real in front of the world. So we're going to see things go his way and some that just won't, but they'll all be big learning experiences. Just quickly back at McLaren, the gap opening up a tiny bit. Norris now putting in some very fast laps, one after the other, setting the fastest lap of the race, and the gap now to his teammate over a second, dropping Piastri out of the DRS zone. 2 seconds, in fact, now. Now, is that Piastri backing off and doing what he's told? Perhaps it's a little bit of that, but I think more Lando Norris, as Andrew said, just showing that he's got more pace in the bag. McLaren have no real competition at this stage in the race, and the only thing that should, at this phase, even though there's a long way to go, the only thing that could possibly stop McLaren having a very dominant result here today is McLaren, and that's what they need to be very careful of.
I think it was Piastri making a mistake coming into turn 6, running wide and driving through the gravel, managing to hold on to the car, but that would have lost him the majority of that chunk of laps. I was going to say it was impressive for Norris if he could suddenly pull 2.5 seconds on his teammate. I think he did pull some time on him, but also aided by Piastri having a little bit of a mistake there. It's lap 33 of 57. Norris, Piastri, the leaders. Then it's Verstappen, Russell, Leclerc, the top 5, Tsunoda, Albon, Hamilton, Gasly and Alonso, the top 10 there. Your point scorers, Antonelli is 11th ahead of Stroll, the two Saubers, Hulkenberg and Bortoleto 13th and 14th, with Lawson in 15th, and the two Haas cars bringing up the rear of the pack in 16th and 17th. Retiring and out of this race, Carlos Sainz's Williams, Jack Doohan's Alpine and Isaac Hadjar's Racing Bull.
Okay, Oscar, we're free to race now. Free to race. You know the rules.
Free to race now. You've dropped off 2.5 seconds. You know the rules, says Tom Stallard to his driver Oscar Piastri.
The other thing to bear in mind in this situation is that it's not always what you see that you're actually seeing, if you see what I mean with Formula One. It's much more complex than that. Think back to Hungary last year when we had Piastri in front, followed by Norris. It looked like Piastri was the faster McLaren. Then they ended up getting them the wrong way round with the pit stops because of strategy that they were playing with. Norris was in front. Suddenly he looked like the faster McLaren because he was in front. There's so much management going on of fuel, of tyres, of brakes, that at any one time, it's not like 10, 15 years ago when you were a mechanic at McLaren, for example, when you were seeing Alonso and Hamilton. They were basically flat chat the entire race on tyres that could cope with that sort of thing. Formula 1 tyres and cars can't cope with that anymore, so we're seeing drivers' race patterns ebbing and flowing.
Big contact for Fernando Alonso. Sorry, Andrew. Alonso in the wall, spinning out and backwards as well. He's moving his helmet, but that is a wrecked Aston Martin, and that looks like just trying to find out where that is on the track. We're on the run down to turn 7, just coming out of turn 6 and 7 as it arcs down Lakeside Drive. And has he put a wheel onto the white line? He is out, and that has prompted the safety car, and that has prompted the pit lane with a flurry of action. Ferrari are out there with what looks like the dry tyres as well. Is this the moment the teams were waiting for? Mercedes are out in the pit lane as well. It was just beginning to get a little bit stagnant, but now that has shaken this Grand Prix to life.
Yeah, exactly right. So everybody now, I suspect, going to go on to slick tyres because it's just so drying out now. We're not expecting any more torrential rain. With the dry line coming, you cannot afford to put another set of wet tyres on. This could be your only pit stop.
Hamilton's in the pits, Rosanna.
Yes, and he's gone for the hard tyres, his first pit stop with Ferrari. Wow, what a moment that must have been. I'm glad he went into the right pit box, and he's back out, followed by an Alpine. Of course, the only Alpine still in, that's Pierre Gasly. And Lando Norris still out there on those intermediate tyres.
Yeah, they have stayed out. Of course, it is the safety car, so it's effectively a cheap stop, which halves the pit lane. Piastri, though, is being told to box. So too now Lando Norris also coming in. Let's head back down to Rosanna. Tennant and Norris almost going into the back. Sorry, Rosanna, the Sauber.
That has cost him, hasn't it? It was Gabriel Bortoleto who came in for the pits and held up Oscar Piastri. He had to get out of the way. He's now in his pit box. Up he goes. Lando Norris also coming in as well, being told to box. So they're double stacking at McLaren. Hard work for the mechanics to kick off the season. Oscar Piastri in. Hard tyres for the McLaren drivers.
Here we go then. This really was the turnover point. Also in comes Max Verstappen, who had really been left all the way down in third by the two McLarens, who were able to really find the gap. Into the pit box he comes, and he goes on to the medium tyre as Charles Leclerc is also told to come into the pits.
The problem with this for Verstappen is that because everybody's changing, there's no opportunity to make strategy work for you. This is not anybody taking a gamble. This is the safety car dictating what you're going to do.
Yes, but what's he done? He's put on the mediums. Everyone else has put on the hards. They're gambling on better grip on those mediums at the restart on a damp track, and that might be a masterstroke from Red Bull.
Sorry, Harry, it could be, but he's such a long way behind the two McLarens who look very
Not now,
much...
it's a safety car.
Well, that's very true. They're going to close right up again. But the two McLarens look so under control around this circuit in these conditions. The one thing I would say, and you're very much correct, Andrew, is that over the course of the weekend that has been dry up to now, Verstappen was a lot closer than we've seen in the beginning part of this race.
It's also still not fully dry. You now dip a wheel onto the wet stuff, and you might well be asking for trouble, but those who've put on the medium tyres so far, Max Verstappen Alex Albon has also done that in the Williams. So too have the two Saubers of Hulkenberg and Bortoleto, and Liam Lawson in the other Red Bull. That would actually be his second stop already of this race. So we've now got 16 cars in this one. Fernando Alonso is out. We haven't seen exactly how that happened for Alonso, but he is out of this race in the Aston Martin. That leaves us 16. Norris leads, Piastri, Verstappen, Russell, Leclerc, who did pit and came back out in 5th spot ahead of Tsunoda. Then comes Albon, Hamilton, Gasly and Antonelli now has managed to work his way up into that top 10.
I don't know if this is correct, maybe we'll get a picture in a minute, but it looks like the two Haas cars have still got intermediate tyres on. Now, they made a pit stop, they came into the pits to change tyres. Did they really go back onto intermediates when everyone else has gone onto slicks? That's some might say a gamble.
Well, they both came in early, didn't they, while it was still raining, to put on those inters, and our graphics are saying that, so they are on intermediates. I will try and catch a glimpse of the Haas cars, but I wonder if they, under the safety car, are just going to hold out hope that suddenly we might well get another deluge that will force everybody else into the pits and they come out in front.
It could be the only explanation. Maybe their weather forecast is different to everybody else's, as we get a replay of what happened to Alonso then. This was a few moments ago that brought this safety car out, and he dips a wheel onto the curb, and again just a passenger, the car swapping ends so quickly, and as soon as you start sliding on this wet track, he had zero control, backed it into the wall. Rear wing comes off, rear wheel I think comes off as well, and that is the end of his day.
An absolute passenger in the end for the oldest driver in the field, the man with the most experience, dropping the car and making a mistake and out of this one. The car still waiting to be collected, so this might be a little bit of a lengthier safety car than we would like. That will allow the entire field to bunch up behind it. They'll let the lap cars overtake as well, so we'll get the full order. And I mean, he took a fair bit of curb, didn't he? But it wasn't quite in the gravel, and that was just enough.
He took a fair bit of curb. It looked like he's actually made a change of direction on the curb, a little bit more of an abrupt one than you might normally see. It wasn't a flowing line. I'm not sure if he had to correct something halfway round, and because he was on the curb, a little bit more slippy than the actual racetrack itself. So a big mistake. It's not just the youngsters and the rookies making mistakes today, is it?
Lando Norris, who has come back in for his first stop, sorry, he stayed out. This is the replay we're seeing. I got all excited there for a minute and panicky, and it was a double stack for the two Mclarens, and fairly smooth as well. And it was very tight though for one of the Mclarens, who got absolutely balked by the Sauber slowing, and indeed the Red Bull having to get out of the way for one of the other Saubers being released. That looked like an unsafe release, slam dunk. Lawson had to literally drive a different direction before going into his pit box.
Yeah, I can't believe that Sauber get away with that one. Unfortunately, that looks like a slam dunk, unsafe release to me, but the stewards, I have no doubt, will look at it. 37 laps gone then, and it is the two McLarens out front. Verstappen now, as Andrew rightly pointed out, closing right up behind them with the benefit of that safety car. He'll get another opportunity once they clear the lapped cars and the two McLarens end up back at the front of the field, which at the moment they're not quite there. He'll get another opportunity to have a go at the papaya McLarens in front.
There is a very small but intense rain shower. Could be like one lap of rain, class 2 to 3, somewhere between lap 45 and 50. Doesn't look like there's much beyond it.
So that's the latest down at the McLaren weather radar for Oscar Piastri. Is that what the likes of the two Haas cars are holding out hope for? Because they are going to be under this safety car for at least a couple more laps here. It's that 37 of 57. Rosanna, McLaren think we might get another lap of rain at some point. How's it looking where you are?
I tend to agree with them, Harry. There are some dark clouds over Port Phillip coming in from the west of Melbourne. Much, much darker than we've had all race long, really. So I'm expecting the heavens to open fairly soon. It's still incredibly windy as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if the two Haas cars may well have just pulled a masterstroke. The longer, of course, they stay under safety car, the longer they're able to look after those intermediate tyres that they're on, whilst everyone else is on dry tyres. And if they get rain, it could come their way.
Somewhere between lap 45 and lap 50, there may be one lap of rain up to class 2 to 3. That's
so
all we give you at the moment.
One lap, class 2 to 3.
Yep.
And you would show on the class 2 to 3, because that's
yes,
not ideal.
Not ideal.
And confident on the one lap only.
I would say, given everything that's happened in Melbourne so far, not confident.
So in terms of the classes then, I think we can work that out. So class 2 to 3, probably the light rain to moderate showers. And McLaren not confident that it will only last a lap.
No, I mean, Class 1 being light rain, Class 3 is actually pretty intense. But even if it does only last for a lap, that will be enough to very much wet the circuit. And given that almost all of the field, and certainly crucially those front runners, are on slick tyres, it will make it like driving on ice. We've seen this before. In fact, we've seen Lando Norris leading a Grand Prix before in conditions like that, haven't we? Many years ago, choosing not to come and pit for wet tyres, trying to make the car stay on the black stuff with the slick tyres and damp, and he didn't manage to make it work. So that could get tricky.
Yeah, so and that another advantage for Verstappen, because the softer your slicks are in his Norris again.
Yeah, I see it's a lot more grey already. So just confirming we're on a box before it's wet, not when it's wet.
Sure, we just don't want a box if it's going to skirt around us.
And that is the conundrum that not only McLaren but the entire field will have to navigate when we come across it.
Also, that's a big call, box before it's wet. What if, Verstappen stays out, you lose 19 seconds in the pits, possibly more in the rain, and you're giving up track position.
That's a driver call, not a team call, which have come from very different positions. Lando Norris, as I just said, has been in that situation before, leading a Grand Prix on a wet track on slick tyres, and it didn't work out for him. He's got that level of experience. He just wants to play things safe, but the team are rightly saying that would be a very, very big call to make.
But that shows how much confidence I think Lando Norris has in the McLaren. If he is willing to lose track position, we've just seen in these mixed conditions how when both McLarens were able to get in front of Verstappen, they were able to drop him.
But then if the rain only lasts for a lap, the gamble, of course, is do you try and see that out? Do you try and gamble that it'll be less intense than you think, last for less time than you think, and will clear up quickly? Or do you go back to that old adage, this is what we always used to come back to in moments like this, just be on the right tyre at the right time. And if that means sometimes making an extra pit stop, sometimes that's the right call. Make the change for the intense one lap of very wet conditions and then change back again.
You could make a lot of time on inters if it's really wet for a period of 5 or 6 laps. Yes, that could make up the difference, but to go back to the big picture, Red Bull have obviously seen McLaren come in, put on the hard tyre. Most people have chosen the hard tyre. Apart from them, only Verstappen, Tsunoda, Albon, Hulkenberg and Bortoleto in the Sauers have chosen the medium. Everyone else has gone for the hard, apart from those random intermediates on the Haas cars.
And the other side of this is that 2 McLarens racing at the front here. Let's just hear from Ocon.
We know why we're doing this, but I think if it doesn't rain in a couple of laps, they will be quicker than us with slicks.
There we go.
Understood.
Interesting. So that was a very strategic move based on the weather forecast we've been hearing at McLaren. Just come back to McLaren, 2 cars at the front, both very much in the fight for this race win and maybe even a championship as the season rolls on. We could even end up here with two cars or 2 drivers getting different strategies as this changeable condition plays out. It might be worth, from a team perspective, splitting your strategies. One's clearly going to have to get a call before the other, and one could work out and one not. One of these drivers could be very happy at the end of the day, one could be very unhappy just because of these changeable conditions favouring one over the other.
Welcome back to Formula One, everybody. In 2025 already, these questions having to be asked. Under safety car conditions at the moment in Melbourne, in Albert Park, for the opening race of the season, lap 39 of 57. The 2 McLarens lead, Verstappen, Russell and Leclerc, the top 5. And the majority have now moved onto the dry tyre. But more rain is in the forecast shortly.
The thing is also, they haven't unlapped all the lapped cars yet for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, it's because there's still a recovery truck on the racetrack, and so if you unlap a car, they release from behind the safety car, they can go quickly to unlap themselves, and that proves dangerous.
They did take a little bit of a while to be able to find the access point to Fernando Alonso's stricken Aston Martin, which has now been cleared from the point of contact coming through turn 7. But as they make their way back to the pit lane, the cars continue to run round behind the safety car. Norris, Piastri, Verstappen, Russell, Leclerc, the top 5. Then it's Tsunoda, Albon, Hamilton, Gasly and Antonelli, the top 10. They're your current point scorers. Lance Stroll was 11th ahead of the 2 Saubers, Hulkenberg and Bortoleto, and Esteban Ocon and Ollie Bearman gambling. Both drivers staying on the intermediate tyres in 14th and 15th. Liam Lawson rounding out the back in 16th position. And last of the remaining drivers, no Fernando Alonso, crashed out. No Carlos Sainz, crashed out. No Jack Doohan, crashed out. And Isaac Hadjar, completing the set, crashed out of this Grand Prix.
That's McLaren radio message about the intense weather coming. They predicted it coming around lap 45. That's 5 laps from now, and we're still behind a safety car with 2 cars in this field on intermediate tyres. That's the 2 Haas cars all the way at the back. We're still not going to get racing going underway next lap, so we can say at least it's going to be 2 more laps. We might end up getting very, very close to this weather window that actually could enable the 2 Haas cars to jump some way up the order if the rain that's predicted comes.
Well, all those questions still to be asked and answered. I also now, as they let through the lapped runners, actually, I just ran through some of the drivers that have retired from this race. One of them, well, let's hear from Norris first.
Lando, weather update. Some rain that was skirting around the track might actually come over the track. If it does, it would last longer than the 1 lap we said earlier and potentially arrive earlier.
So then it's better to go for the Inter now, no?
And that would be the bold call from Lando Norris if he can, if he does it, if the rain skirts around or if it comes right on top.
They can't stop for Inter now. They go to the back of the field because it's all compressed. You have to stay out on the slicks for now and see what happens with the weather.
Well, Norris is the one saying those things on the radio. Here he is again.
Lando, we do not want to fit the wrong tyre before the conditions.
And there it is. Do not do it before the conditions change. See what you're up against and then do it. Lap 40 of 57. I think as the lap cars were overtaking, I think did one of the Mclarens just have a bit of a lock-up as well. It was Norris as he was trying to navigate his way around the right-hander as the Haas was also weaving its way to overtake and catch up to the back of the pack.
You can't second-guess the conditions to that extent. I mean, just cast your mind back to last year's British Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc, Ferrari rather, is Haas in the pits. They're fitting.
Bearman's going in for the medium tyre. So they've seen. So while Lando Norris and McLaren think the rain could well come right over the track and actually last longer than just the 1 lap, the cars that stayed out on intermediates when everybody else changed to dry, hoping that they would be able to make hay while the rain came down, have now decided no, we can't make it last, and almost spinning out of turn 1 for the Haas of Ollie Bearman. Now on the medium tyre. That's a bizarre call.
Well, I was just about to say, have they played a blinder here by putting themselves onto the intermediate? The only cars in the field, they can take gambles like that because they're at the back. They've now ditched that gamble. Yes, it's a free stop. They're already at the back and everyone's going slowly under the safety car. They've now aligned their strategies with pretty much everyone else around them. So on that sense, they're no longer taking a gamble. But taking a gamble when you're last on the field is exactly what you should be doing as the safety car is coming in at the end of this lap.
And we will get back to racing. And as Bearman came out of the pit lane, getting oh so close to Max Verstappen, who was in 3rd, they both reached the apex of the corner at the same time. Verstappen had to get out of the way, and Ollie Bearman had to stop himself from having a crash into the wall and hold on to that car. The hard task for Bearman is now he's put on these tyres and he's trying to overtake everybody to get in front of the safety car, which has just turned the lights off. The safety car will now speed up to get back to the pit lane. Bearman will now try and catch up to the back of the pack, but he's not going to be able to do it in time. And Lando Norris now takes over as the pace setter for the rest of the field, and they'll all bunch up behind him. Last time we had a safety car restart, pretty much nearly every driver behind for 4th place downwards got investigated for not keeping within 10 car distance of the car in front of them. It looks like they're all just about behaving on that front for the time being, but we're about to go racing once more, and are we going to get a deluge of rain in the next few minutes?
And we're about to go racing with cars. The 2 McLarens almost push each other out, and there goes Lando. He's broken away. This is dry tyres on a circuit that only has a very narrow dry line.
Almost pushing him out of the corner was Oscar Piastri in the second McLaren, but now Lando Norris has gone for it round the final corner, and we're back to green flag racing here at Albert Park for the Australian Grand Prix, and it's a good restart for Lando Norris on those dry tyres into turn one. Piastri second, then comes Verstappen, who's on the medium tyre compared to the two McLarens on the harder compound. Russell is fourth, Leclerc fifth, Tsunoda sixth, Albon seventh ahead of Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari is eighth, Gasly ninth, Antonelli 10th.
In 3 laps, class 3 rain expected, lasting for 2 laps.
Class 3 is a lot.
Yes, this is what we see for the radar, but we'll have to wait for it.
So Charles Leclerc being told on the radio that's when the rain is coming, and it will be a lot. He's currently 4 seconds adrift down in 5th.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm excited for this. On the pit walls, they will be nervous. I'm excited. We've got all the field now on slick tyres on a car on a racetrack that's about to get a lot wetter.
Rosanna Tennant, you're outside for us while we're in the commentary box. What's your view? What class rain are you predicting?
Just a few spots of rain, but it's incredibly windy, Harry. So gusty. But yes, you can start to feel the rain now. It is starting to come down here in the paddock.
Wow, here we go then. Is this going to throw a cat amongst the pigeons for the 16 drivers that remain, now having all changed tyres from their intermediates onto the dry tyres, whether it be a hard or a medium, and the rain currently expected to fall in the next few minutes, but no one knows quite how intense or for how long it will fall for.
And that's an absolutely brilliant first lap from Lando Norris on these slick tyres after the safety car restart. 1.6 seconds he put on his teammate Oscar Piastri.
Yeah, really good start, as DRS has also now been re-enabled when you are within a car in front of the allocated zones, of which there are 4 of them around this Albert Park circuit. You can press the button on the steering wheel and your rear wing flap will open, and that gives you around about a 7/10 of a second advantage when chasing the car down in front.
Seems like it'll be next lap now.
We don't want to jump too early, class half in pit lane.
Lando Norris really wants to get the jump on this, doesn't he? He is desperate to make the right call, desperate to do it before they've even seen the weather. The spots are coming down. Zach Brown, the CEO of McLaren on the pit wall, has just had to stick his hand out just to see what the temperature and what the weather is like. The gap between the two McLarens is 2.2 seconds. Here's the Mercedes of Antonelli.
Rain could get pretty intense.
So the problem that the drivers have got is that while you can gain an awful lot of time on wet tyres on a wet track if everyone else is on slicks, if you're on wets when everyone else is on slicks and it's dry, you can lose an awful lot of time.
I think Tsunoda has just been able to get ahead of Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. Leclerc looks like he might have fallen down to 6th the last lap around. We haven't seen how it happened, as Gabriel Bortoleto gets a 5-second time penalty for an unsafe release in his Sauber. Indeed, Tsunoda is right ahead of a lovely gaggle. Tsunoda in the Racing Bulls, flying in this race, up to 5th, ahead of the Ferrari, but Leclerc is chasing him down. So too is the Williams of Alex Albon, and Pierre Gasly's not far away either. Lockups though for Tsunoda and the Ferrari of Leclerc, and actually Gasly's a little bit further back. The man chasing this gaggle down is the other Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time champion in the hunt.
So we're forecasting that we won't be able to stay out on dry tyres. It will be heavy enough for Inter.
That's what Mercedes are telling George Russell, who sits just ahead of this fighting gaggle in 4th.
Yeah, Tsunoda doing a really good job. He has got a gaggle of cars behind him. The problem is no one can afford to step off that racing line because it's very narrow. They're on slick tyres, and even if you just move over by a metre, you're on the wet stuff, you've got 0 grip, and you're a passenger, as we've seen a number of drivers do already.
Well, we haven't seen it, but I'd quite like to see how Tsunoda did it, but he's going to have his mirrors filled in the run down to turn 11. Leclerc with DRS has the little nose to the inside, and both McLarens off. Coming into turn 13, Piastri spinning round, trying to control it onto the grass. Norris dives into the pit lane. Has the rain fallen, and is Piastri stuck? The Australian dreams are dying as Piastri is spinning his rear wheels on the grass and cannot get that car. Verstappen takes the lead. Tsunoda up to 2nd. Norris has dived into the pits. Disaster for the 2 McLarens who had such an advantage. Now it looks like they're down to 1 car.
And I don't even think the team was ready for the pit stop. I think Norris made his own call. It was a slow pit stop for McLaren. They have put the intermediate tyres on, but Norris, as he comes out of the pits, is now dicing all the way back with Liam Lawson.
And Norris, well, he has come out of the pits, and Piastri is still trying to get off the grass. This is the sound of the Australian. Your 1, 2, 3 is Verstappen, who's just been told to pit. Yuki Tsunoda, the man Red Bull overlooked to promote as Verstappen's teammate, is second, and Lewis Hamilton is third for Ferrari. These are unbelievable scenes in Melbourne. Piastri is currently reversing his McLaren, trying to find a bit of tarmac to get off the grass, to the roar and the cheers of the Australians willing their man on. The only Aussie left in the grid, and he's managed to get going. It's not over yet for Oscar Piastri and McLaren, but he has a lot of ground to make up as he makes his way back to the pits.
Oh, that was quite staggering stuff. It was Oscar Piastri. The roar you heard was the crowd cheering him, getting back on. Oh, Verstappen's been told to abort the pit stop and stay out on the racetrack. The rain may be not as intense as they expected.
Hamilton's up to second. Tsunoda might have had a moment on there as Piastri makes it back to his pit box, runs a little long. That means the mechanics have to slightly move on their spots to get the tyres sorted, but that'll be the least of their problems as Piastri has fallen down to pretty much plumb last. He comes out in 15th spot. It's lap 46 of 57. The rain is coming down in Melbourne. Verstappen leads. Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari is second. Pierre Gasly in the Alpine is third. Then comes Tsunoda and Charles Leclerc. Now, all those drivers have not come into the pits for wets.
Looks like the rain is coming here now. We need to make a decision.
Understood, Max. We will let you know.
So they didn't pit him, I think, because he was about to lose the lead if he pitted back to Norris, who's just crossed the line 18 seconds behind Norris after that first lap on the intermediate tyres. What happens now? Can Verstappen hold on to that lead? How much can Norris get back at him? Does Verstappen have to stop for intermediate tyres? Can he stay out? Is the rain going to get heavy or not? So many questions.
Welcome back to Formula One, everybody, in 2025. What a treat we have in store for us right now. The rule book, the form book, has been ripped up in the last lap and a half, and we don't know what's going to happen. The weather is causing havoc. Verstappen, who can barely get around the track, has just been told to stay out, and now he's been told to box. That means coming to the pits just in time for the final corner. He makes it back. That might well promote Hamilton up, but I think he'll come into the pits. The leading driver on the intermediate tyre is Lando Norris. The gap between himself and Verstappen is 14.2 seconds. The average pit loss is around 18 or 19 seconds as the Red Bull mechanics get to work and send Verstappen back on his way. Lewis Hamilton takes the lead of the Australian Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc is second, but they are both on the hard tyre. Lando Norris is up to second now. He's managed to get Charles Leclerc. Tsunoda is stuck out there on the medium tyre as well. Then comes Verstappen, who comes out in fifth on the intermediate tyre. We've got a yellow flag out on track though.
The wettest part. You are leading the race.
Yes, very slippery, mate. It's more rain coming down.
Norris back up into the lead as the other Red Bull of Liam Lawson finds himself in the wall. It looks like he's still able to keep it going though. Norris leads, Hamilton, Leclerc, Verstappen, Russell.
If we get a safety car here because of these stricken cars, Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc will get a free pit stop and could end up as the net winners of all of this. Safety car.
Safety car, that is unbelievable. Liam Lawson has caused it and is out along with Gabriel Bortoleto in the Sauber. The F2 champion has come to grief. What has happened in the last 2 laps of this Australian Grand Prix? Lawson has said he is okay on the radio. Lando Norris has gotten back up into the lead on, crucially, that intermediate tyre. Then comes Lewis Hamilton in second, and we're about to see how it all began. Mark, with Oscar Piastri running out into the gravel, following his teammate Lando Norris in the run-up to the penultimate corner.
So I don't think Ferrari going to benefit from this? Because I'm looking at the track map at the moment, and Verstappen is right behind them.
Yeah.
So they're going to pit and lose those positions they've gained.
They've also, unfortunately it came out at the wrong moment because they were on the wrong part of the circuit to make an immediate pit stop, weren't they? And you're right, Verstappen right behind. It still may be a net win for them in terms of having to make a pit stop under racing conditions. Doing it under the safety car is going to take about half as much time with the field going around slowly, but I don't think they're going to end up towards as far up the front as they perhaps hoped.
Oh, and we had a spin there. That was early, which is why Tsunoda was able to get through initially on Charles Leclerc. The Ferraris then coming in. Verstappen gets promoted up to second. So too does George Russell as Lewis Hamilton makes his first stop to get on to these intermediate tyres once again, and he can barely get going. His rear wheel's spinning up. They're double stacking down at Ferrari. Charles Leclerc can also barely get away, but it's as clean as you can get it in these conditions for the two Ferraris. And right now, to get a look at the order, it is Norris back up into the lead ahead of Max Verstappen. George Russell is third. Alex Albon has worked his way up into fourth. Kimi Antonelli, who started this race down in 16th, is up to fifth. Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin is sixth, ahead of Hulkenberg. Sauber. Gasly is eighth. Hamilton comes out in ninth, ahead of his teammate Charles Leclerc.
And we're going to have another restart with Verstappen right behind Norris, this time on intermediate tyres, the third safety car of this afternoon. Goodness me.
And we think it's possibly going to dry out before the end of this race, so it's still not done. These are maybe not the final tyres and the final conditions that we'll see for the remaining, 10 laps?
We're down to 14 cars, by the way. We've lost Liam Lawson, Gabriel Bortoleto, Fernando Alonso, Carlos Sainz, Jack Doohan and Isaac Hadjar. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 6 rookies that have come into this sport. 5 if you include Fernando Alonso in that, down and out of this race. And Carlos Sainz on debut for his Williams team, also coming a cropper right at the start in the initial formation. We're now just seeing Gabriel Bortoleto, the F2 champion in the Sauber, who span out coming out of turn 11 and did manage to do a little bit of damage. He scraped along the wall and then found the runoff. And not what Gabriel Bortoleto would have wanted on that one. It looked like actually the rear suspension also failed as he went round on himself too.
Yeah, that was really quite strange. I don't know if he hit a curb in sideways motion that maybe broke the suspension, because as he came round, the rear wheel sort of collapsed under itself. We'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, the net losers, as it's turned out, because of the timing of that safety car and where the two Ferraris were on the circuit, are Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, but also Yuki Tsunoda, who was running so well and so far up, dropped all the way down now to P11.
Yeah, we didn't quite see what happened to Tsunoda. He was right up there in second and then suddenly fell away. Just getting a look at Liam Lawson's crash as well. Copycat of Isaac Hadjar in the Racing Bulls on the initial formation lap in the middle of turn 1. Found himself spinning round and into the barrier. And Tsunoda's problem, it's like the TV director couldn't hear me as he went off, lost his Racing Bulls on the approach to turn 13 and found the grass. Did look like he was able to get back onto the track though, but is now down to 11th. Right, lap 49 of 57. Safety car conditions. It's Norris, Verstappen, Russell, the top 3. Rosanna Tennant. Here's Hamilton's radio first.
So he said it wasn't going to rain much. Just missed a big opportunity there.
Understood.
No position am I now? Back in
P9
again.
Hamilton already not happy with that, Rosanna.
Yeah, and it's completely stopped raining, Harry. It's now dry in the paddock. Just drips of rain from the roofs and the trees. It's not raining. So you don't want to be on the intermediate tyres perhaps now as we head towards the final stages of this race.
It is incredible what we're seeing. The Piastri mark as well, we should say, after his bit of a disaster lap. He is now stabilised in 13th place.
And also, maybe worth him being the first man to take a gamble here if we're going to go back to slick tyres at some point.
I think we're also just seeing the reason Tsunoda got so edged out, and I wonder if there's a bit of contact actually between the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. They were almost going wheel to wheel and dicing Gasly just ahead of him, coming through the final few corners of this lap, and the Alpine can barely get it turned in on those dry tyres. Just managed to limp back to the pits, and then Charles Leclerc staying out and braving it. So that was how close and how fine the margins were as the rain was pouring down.
Very weird there to hear Lewis Hamilton say to his engineer that didn't he say that the rain wasn't going to be that bad, because Charles Leclerc was told exactly the opposite. So I don't know what was happening on the Ferrari pit wall.
Yeah, true. Well, this whole, as I said earlier, the relationship between driver and engineer has to grow and has to build over time, but not the clearest of communications, it seems, between the two. There's still a long way to go. Even though we've only got 7 laps to go, it still feels like there's an awful lot to play
Is that
out.
all?
I know.
Unbelievable. 7 laps to go of this first race of the season. We're back under safety car conditions. It's Lando Norris who, out of all of that, still holds the lead from Max Verstappen in second in the Red Bull. George Russell's Mercedes is third. Alex Albon and the Williams, big benefit out of the carnage of the rain in the last 2 laps, up to 4th. So too for Kimi Antonelli, so too for Lance Stroll. Could Nico Hulkenberg get some points here in the Sauber? His new team, he's up in 7th. Gasly didn't really make any gains, down in 8th for Alpine. Same for Hamilton. Leclerc has lost out. He's down to 10th. Tsunoda, the other big loser, down to 11th. Then comes Esteban Ocon in 12th. Piastri is the biggest of the losers, I would say, down in 13th, and Bearman 14th. At one point, Haas could have really benefited from staying out on those intermediates when everybody else changed to the dry.
But we're back in that same situation again, where it's Piastri now who has the opportunity that the Haas cars had. They're running right at the very back of this field. The safety car is going to come in probably at the end of the next lap, because they're letting cars overtake now. Now's the one opportunity, if you're going to make it, to make a pit stop. It's a massive gamble, but Piastri has nothing to lose. He's back in P13, 7 laps to go. He's going to struggle to make progress if he's on the same strategy as everyone else. Why not roll the dice?
The Australian Grand Prix kicking off a big day of sport across 5 Live today, and if you are up early, well, then you've got a great day in store for you. Action in the Premier League from 1:30, Arsenal against Chelsea. Then from 4:30 we've got the League Cup final, Newcastle against Liverpool, and then action between Leicester and Man United from 7 o'clock this evening. That's all to come on 5 Live, but good morning if you are waking up. It's good afternoon from Melbourne, from the opening round of the 2025 Formula 1 season, and if you are just joining us, I'm afraid you are going to have to go back on BBC Sounds and replay this entire Grand Prix, because it has been a roller coaster from start to finish. We've got less than 7 laps remaining of this race. The weather has played havoc, having been grey, miserable and raining all throughout the morning. We've just had another deluge. I'm actually now looking out the commentary box and seeing a bit of blue sky peeking towards us as it starts to brighten up, and it's been hot and sunny all throughout the weekend so far. And at the end of it all right now, with a sprint to the finish, it's Lando Norris who leads, Max Verstappen in second and George Russell in third. We have lost Liam Lawson, Gabriel Bortoleto, Fernando Alonso, Carlos Sainz, Jack Doohan and Isaac Hadjar from this race, all finding the wall one way or another. We're down to 14 cars. One of the biggest losers in the last couple of laps has been the home hero, Oscar Piastri, the Australian, who was running for second, pushing his teammate for the win and spinning out from the grass in the wet weather for his McLaren. Made it back to the pits, but unfortunately will have a bit of a mission to try and get himself back up into even a podium position right now. I think that's hopefully summed up what's gone on. The safety car is now ending. My name is Harry Benjamin. Alongside me is the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley, the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. We're in the commentary box looking out right at the end of the main straight. Rosanna Tennant is down in the paddock keeping an eye on all the happenings there. And here we go then, Mark. What are you expecting for this sprint to the end? Can you expect anything?
I'm expecting the unexpected, which is what we've had all race long, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. What a way to start a 2025 campaign. Lando Norris is going to resume control of the race again. He's still sitting behind the safety car, but that safety car has the lights turned off and it will peel into the pit lane as it reaches the end of the lap, giving Lando Norris control. But it's Verstappen once again right underneath his rear wing.
Norris, Verstappen, Russell, Albon, Antonelli, the top 5, Stroll, Hulkenberg, Gasly, Hamilton, Leclerc, the top 10, Tsunoda, Ocon, Piastri and Bearman, the 14 drivers in this race, as Lando Norris is just keeping Verstappen at bay before he puts his foot down and starts to lead them away through the right-hander of turn 12 into the left of 13 with one more corner left to go. It's a little bit slippery still coming into that left-hander round the final corner, the right-hand sweeper, and we are back to green flag racing as Norris looks in his mirrors to check where Verstappen is, but he has done a decent restart once more. He's had to do a few of those so far today, and through turns 1 and 2 it's Norris with the jump on Verstappen.
Yeah, he's done a very, very good job once again. That McLaren looking very, very good in all conditions, and in the hands of of Lando Norris very much under control right now. George Russell is right underneath the rear wing of Max Verstappen. It's actually Verstappen feeling the pressure rather than giving any to Lando Norris. Could George Russell finally make a move? He's been anonymous in this race to some extent. Could he now mount a pressure? Could he mount an attack on Max Verstappen to move his way up into the higher podium positions?
Yeah, some big points as well on offer for those a little further back. Lance Stroll in 6th, Nico Hulkenberg in 7th. They would be incredible results for those two drivers and teams if they can hold on to them. It is drying up. The rain looks like it's stopped as the blue skies appear over the track. There's still spray though being kicked up from the cars, but that will quickly dry. Everybody's on the intermediate tyre. Is there a sense that you've just got to hold on to it till the end now, regardless?
You absolutely have to now. There's no way you can take a risk. This is why I'm so surprised Piastri didn't take the risk under the safety car, given that he's all the way at the back now. Stick some slicks on and towards the end maybe start to make serious progress.
Charles Leclerc on that restart though, having a go on his teammate, and there was no inch given. Indeed, there was contact between the rear right of Charles Leclerc at the tyre and the front left part of the front wing for Lewis Hamilton. No damage done, but that got Leclerc up to 9th, and Hamilton biffed out of the way down to 10th.
Yeah, so difficult afternoon really for Ferrari when it showed real signs of promise early in the weekend. It just hasn't quite materialised, not quite delivering what we expected from them in qualifying. Conditions not favouring them today, not going their way, timings of safety car as well, and maybe a couple of decisions that they perhaps could have got slightly better as well. But Antonelli, really strong day for him at the office, having started so far back in P16 all the way up in P5 now.
And how's this for a competitive order? I think we've got about 8 teams all in the top 9. We've got McLaren, Red Bull, Mercedes, Williams, an Aston Martin, a Sauber, an Alpine and a Ferrari, all occupying the majority of the point scoring positions from what at some points felt like we were going to get a bit of a procession from the McLarens out in front. That has all been thrown away thanks to the weather and the strategy calls, and Charles Leclerc and the Ferrari, despite it being a disappointing day so far for the team, is not giving up hope just yet. He is piling on the pressure to the back of Pierre Gasly's Alpine as they come through the fast sweepers of 9 and 10. Couldn't find a way through there. Indeed, Leclerc getting a quick snap on the steering wheel as he applied the throttle out of 10.
Yeah, he's got to be very careful. He just put a wheel on the grass as well on the right-hand side of the car. We've seen others do that and pay a price, but still he continues. Leclerc in P9 chasing down 8th place Pierre Gasly, and it's Hulkenberg up in P7 ahead of him. So you're absolutely right, a topsy-turvy order right now, which I love for the start of the season.
Sauber will be elated if they can bring home 6 points right at the start of the season. It's what we saw last year. When you get given these chaotic races, the opportunity for those further down the midfield towards the back is massive as the Alpine of Gasly finds the grass and finds the water, skids back onto the track, but that's put him on the back foot and has allowed Charles Leclerc to get up into 8th, and Hamilton follows through as well into 9th. Gasly losing positions there, and now he's got Oscar Piastri, who will be desperate to try and salvage something from this Grand Prix in the last few laps, hunting down his French rival in the blue and pink Alpine to get that final point for 10th.
Yeah, to get a point is, or a couple of points is all that Oscar Piastri can hope for after a spin just in that mix of time when the safety car was coming out, the rain was falling down. Piastri found himself pirouetting onto the grass, and it took him the best part of half a lap to get that car recovered, taking reverse and reversing for 50 metres in that car, to the enormous cheer of the crowd when he finally got going again. But it's cost him what would have been a really strong result today.
At one point, Piastri and Gasly were going side by side into the 9-10 sweeper. Brave for Piastri to try and hold it round the outside. Ultimately, nothing came of that. Just behind Piastri is Tsunoda, who will be bitterly disappointed with what could have been a huge points-paying result for him and Racing Bulls. And the two Haas cars, I think they'll be fairly relieved just to make it to the end in one piece. Ocon and Bearman rounding out the top 14. We've lost Lawson, Bortoleto, Alonso, Sainz, Doohan and Hadjar. So only 14 cars remain in this race. Now, Kimi Antonelli, the Mercedes rookie, the Italian driver who replaces Lewis Hamilton this year, didn't get off to the best of starts in qualifying, but has made hay in these incredulous conditions and is hounding the back of Alex Albon for 4th place in the Williams as Oscar Piastri finally gets through on the Alpine of Pierre Gasly through the right-hander of turn 3.
Yeah, so that's back into the points for Piastri. One solitary point for P10. It's his teammate Lando Norris who has the fastest lap of the race right out front right now, but there is no point in 2025 for the fastest lap of the race. That's a rule change for this year. Only the 25 points available to the winner of this Grand Prix. That's what Lando Norris is chasing down, and right now he has that under control with a gap back to Max Verstappen of 1.3 seconds.
It has come Lando Norris's and McLaren's way, even after all the back and forth on the radio about when to pit and trying to pit before the rain even came to try and catch the conditions. Ultimately, it took the rain arriving and the McLarens to both find the gravel and peel away. You mentioned that gap, Mark, was over a second. Well, now, though, on lap 56 of 57, as we begin the penultimate racing lap of this Grand Prix, Verstappen has closed it down to almost half a second. Could Verstappen spring a surprise here late in the day? And to Norris's despair, after all this, could he lose out on this Grand Prix win?
Well, Norris has a very, very good car underneath him. We've seen that in all conditions today. He's had things generally under control. He's now getting pressure, and Verstappen has DRS. And one thing we know about Verstappen, he will not give up.
Verstappen has DRS. The pace is in the car. Do not overpush it.
Do not overpush it. Have confidence in your car that the pace is there, even with Verstappen's advantage of DRS. The McLaren has looked the better package overall compared to the Red Bull from what we've seen so far this weekend, and he only has to hold on for another lap or so, but Verstappen is mounting the pressure. These two have gone toe-to-toe so many times in the last year. Norris trying to mount what could have been a title charge in the latter half of 2024. Ultimately, it did not come to fruition, but fighting with Max Verstappen, both pushing to the limits, so much so that we've had to take a look at the driver racing guidelines about how they go racing. Verstappen knows the rule book. He knows how hard he can push, but so too now does Norris. How much has he grown in stature? How much has his racing strategy and ability improved over the course of fighting with Verstappen? He is one lap away from taking the Grand Prix victory.
Yeah, here we go then, starting the final lap. Verstappen still with DRS, still underneath the rear wing. A snap of oversteer on the Red Bull as he pushes desperately hard to close down that gap. He'll only get one or two more opportunities, will Verstappen, to make it move. Is he going to take a risk? Is he going to see a lunge here on the final lap of this Grand Prix?
It's what you would expect from Max Verstappen and his type of racecraft, but right now he's actually fallen away through the first sector. Russell is 6 seconds back and not in the fight for this one. Kimi Antonelli is fourth. Decent result, salvage for the two Mercedes driver, although Antonelli is under investigation for an unsafe release, which will usually be a slam dunk. He might get a 5-second time penalty, which would push him behind Albon, who is fifth. Stroll sixth. Hulkenberg holds on to seventh ahead of the two Ferraris, Leclerc and Hamilton. Piastri holding on to that final spot in the top 10 so far.
Probably only one more opportunity for Verstappen. He's still got DRS, but as they head down towards turn 11, I don't think he's going to be close enough to move out. He's not. Norris under control, gets the car nicely turned in. Verstappen still sliding the rear end, and I think it's going to be Norris as we close out the final few corners.
Two more corners remain, and I think Lando Norris might have just done the job when all looked like it might be lost for McLaren with the rain pouring down after 57 laps of frenetic racing. It will be Lando Norris who crosses the line and takes victory here in Australia. Norris seals the deal and takes the first win of the year. Verstappen in second. George Russell rounds out the podium in third. Antonelli came across the line in fourth, but will have a penalty. That puts him back behind Alex Albon. Sensational result for the Williams driver. Antonelli rounds out the top five, but Lando Norris started on pole and took the win, but the 57 laps in between it, Mark, nobody could write that.
Wow, take a breath. That was just fantastic. What a way to start the year. Piastri did manage to finally move past Hamilton on that closing lap and take 2 points rather than the one solitary point, but he's going to be the most disappointed man this weekend. His teammate has won the race. Verstappen in second.
What a mate. What a P1. Great job.
Oof. A little bit of pressure. Well done, boys. Beautifully handled, executed to the second, 1 second later, and we were done. So well done, everyone. Congrats. Amazing way to start the year. Thank you so much.
And well, it was executed just about almost perfect, but that wasn't without a few questions and queries from Norris, who just seemed so desperate to try and get the jump on the weather at one point.
Yeah, well, he was nervous. You could tell that in his radio communications. And, you know, just before he made a pit stop, he had a big off. His teammate had an off at the same time. Either of those two drivers could have spelled disaster for them. As it was Piastri that got the worst of it and pirouetted onto the grass. Norris got away with it, but it was a knife edge for both of them.
Well, here we go then. I think right at the very end, Oscar Piastri managed to nick off another place at the expense of Lewis Hamilton, going side by side into the left-right sweeper of turn 9 and 10. Hamilton didn't fight that one too hard, and Piastri managed to salvage a couple more points there from what could have been second place, even maybe the win. After all of that, the Australians just seem to have no luck on home soil here. Norris takes the win of the Australian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen in second. George Russell is third to complete the podium. Albon in the Williams is fourth. Antonelli on debut gets fifth. That actually puts Mercedes as the leaders in the Constructors' Championship. Lance Stroll is sixth, and Nico Hulkenberg and Sauber would be elated with seventh. Leclerc, Piastri and Hamilton the top 10. Rosanna Tennant down on the ground as they come in to Parc Fermé.
Max Verstappen is just coming into Parc Fermé now. That's the sound of the Red Bull pulling up to the number 2 spot. Turns his car off. The crowd are on their feet though, as you can imagine. Orange hats aplenty, cheering on the Papaya team. And that's the Mercedes of George Russell right in front of me. He switches it off. His blue gloves, blue helmet. What a successful outing for Mercedes, George Russell. And then Lando Norris, the victor, rolls in underneath the podium, such as they do here in Australia. The lead car pulls in underneath the pit building, which is underneath the podium. Max Verstappen just fitting his steering wheel back into his Red Bull, and he hops out over the halo, checks back into the cockpit that he's put everything back where it needs to be, and he starts to take off his gloves. George Russell has just lifted up his visor, wipes his eyes, headrest out on the front of the car and the steering wheel too. He's just putting back in with the little tape saying George on it. He's hopping out. Lando Norris also getting out. Obviously they all need to get out. The mechanics are now coming to the cars to make sure that they are looked after. Of course, it doesn't stop, does it, when the checkered flag flies? The mechanics still need to make sure the cars are looked after. Lando Norris on the front of his car, just congratulating his mechanics. He's got an arm around one of their shoulders and a fist bump and a shake of the fist. Obviously so happy with the way he has started this 2025 season. Max Verstappen congratulating George Russell as well. Max holding his helmet, wipes his brows, scratches his head, shakes his hair, and he's going over to his stand to put his cap on and wipe his face with a towel. They're getting ready for the podium celebrations, of course, and hopefully we'll hear from them as well, Harry.
Hopefully so. I think we will shortly, but Lando Norris then with a chat and an exchange to his mechanic, all smiles. Not so much the case for Oscar Piastri, although he does give a little wry smile and a dejected nod to some of the marshals and the FIA delegates. He knows what could have happened, and it was kind of unfortunate for Piastri because both McLarens went off, but the nature at which Piastri came back onto the circuit just felt like Hikaru's carry had too much speed on him, and round the car went. So much so, beached himself on the grass.
Yeah, wet grass has zero grip if you're in a Formula 1 car, and it's going to really hurt Piastri because this is an opportunity. I know there's a long season, there's a lot to play for still, but first blood counts for something. It's about establishing yourself, particularly in a team that we can clearly see from today has a very, very good package. They are going to be in the hunt for this championship. You can tell that already. Everything's in place, and he needed to establish himself as a very much of a front runner. I think he did that on pace, but the result won't reflect that, unfortunately, at the end of the day.
Norris heading straight over to his mum and dad to celebrate with the rest of his team as well in the Parc Fermé area. Let's head to hear from his boss. Rosanna's with him.
Congratulations, what a way to start the season. Maybe a little bittersweet, but so proud of Lando Norris, I imagine.
Yeah, Lando! Give me one moment.
Zach just screaming out to get Lando to come over. Shake of the hand as well for his father as well. So a very special moment. They're just discussing the race. Oh, there are words I can't repeat, but he's having a good chat with his boss. He looks relatively calm, Harry, I have to say. George Russell coming over to congratulate him as well. They're having a laugh and a giggle. Both drivers look like they've just had a walk in the park on a casual Sunday afternoon, Harry. Don't look like they've been sweating out there at all. Of course, conditions have been so difficult. And as I say that, I look above. We've got blue skies over the podium. Wow, you couldn't have predicted that during that race, could you?
And it's like it never rained at all of a sudden, isn't it? Incredible, great scenes from Parc Fermé. What a race to kick off the year, Mark. Absolutely insane. You could not have written that. Norris, Verstappen and Russell may seem like a fairly obvious one. I'll tell you what, let's hear from Russell speaking to Jolyon Palmer.
George Russell, a podium to start the year. I'm exhausted having watched the race. How do you feel having driven that one?
Yeah, it was a great race to come home in P3, and I just want to say a massive well done to Lando. It's, I think, in a race like that, when you're leading, it's probably your worst nightmare, but he did a great job, and also really well done to Kimi to come back to P5, which is a really impressive first race. But for us, you know, it wasn't our strongest weekend, but to end up on the podium, super happy, and yeah, let's see what we can do next week.
I mean, that looked like some of the toughest conditions I've ever seen. It crashed before the start of the race, a delayed start, crashes under safety car. How do you keep it on the island in conditions like that?
Yeah, it was good fun. It was I was quite enjoying it, to be honest, because I was hoping the two guys ahead would make a mistake and I could slip through, but that just didn't seem to be the case today. But really tricky, but that's what F1's about, and that's made it exciting for us, and I hope everyone enjoyed it at home.
And the best start of the season the Mercedes have made since you've been at the team. Podium, you've got Kimi Antonelli, your young teammate, with you as well. It's got to be confidence boosting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been, all things considered, it's been a really good weekend. We know McLaren are out in front at the moment, but this was a strong result.
Well done, George. Enjoy the podium.
Cheers, everybody.
Unbelievable race. So much going on to unpick through it, but let's start with the finale. Pressuring Lando all the way, somehow through it all. It's you two at the front again, and you've just missed out this time, but brilliant job, well done.
Yeah, it was a difficult race, of course, but at the end it was fun. I mean, of course, Lando had a little moment on entry of 6, so he lost a lot of momentum there. So that's why I got close, and then I got the DRS, so I got close, but it's very hard to pass around here. But it was fun, those last laps, you know, pushing, at least, you know, when you're fighting for the win. But I'm just very happy to bring it home, score good points, and this is let's say, a decent starting point for us.
Talk us through the call to stay out on the slicks, because that looked like a split-second decision. One McLaren was off, one pitted, and suddenly you're in the lead of the race.
Yeah, I think that was also, you know, it started to rain a bit. They went off, so it was a bit like a panic, like, oh, I need to box. So they went in. I stayed out. The first lap, honestly, I think it was all right. But then, unfortunately, the weather continued a little bit more on the other side of the track as well. And, we then had to box. But I think at the end of the day, even if we would have boxed like one lap more, like earlier, would have still been P2 anyway after that stop. So I think it was worth the gamble, you know. It was quite spicy out there with the slick tires, but it was all right at the end.
Yeah, you certainly gave it your best shot. So what about the car in general, moving towards China next week? Is it better than you expected to be able to fight for a win straight away?
I think it is where I expected to be. So you could see also in that first stint, you know, we were lacking a little bit of pace compared to the McLaren. But it's still 18 points more than what I had here last year, so I take that.
All right, well done, Max. Thanks for giving us a great race.
Thank you.
Max Verstappen talking to Jolyon Palmer, who politely waits for our race winner.
Lando, what an unbelievable victory. How difficult was that out there? You had so much to deal with.
I don't have a microphone. I'll steal your microphone. It was amazing. Thank you. A tough race, especially with Max behind me. I was pushing, you know. It was especially the last 2 laps, a little bit stressful. I'm not going to lie, but amazing way to start the year. A tough one because you know, we went off and we made some big mistakes. I went through the gravel, a lot of the damage. Just tricky conditions, but these are the ones that are enjoyable and fun and unpredictable. But this time we got it right and we ended up on top, so I'm very happy.
And what were your thoughts? You seemed so calm the whole way through the race. You had a delayed start from pole position. You had Max behind you. You had Oscar behind you. Max again at the end. And then there was this threat of rain coming under the safety car. How much is that playing on your mind when you've just got to keep it on a difficult racetrack as well? How do you keep calm? How do you keep the communication so good?
We got it wrong a lot last year, so I guess we learned from our mistakes. You know, we lost out on Silverstone and Canada through a race like this. So we've learned from our mistakes, I think. It's still only round 1 of 24, but you know, dealing with the pressure, dealing with Max, dealing with Oscar behind me, I was pushing the whole way through. You know, I could relax inside, but I wasn't relaxing from how much I was pushing. So a tough one. So to not make overly too many mistakes, to not have a mistake that cost me anything, I guess I can take a little bit of credit for that. You know, so yeah. A tough, challenging race, but I mean, for McLaren, I need to give a big thanks because they've given me an amazing car. So I have to start with them.
No one was ever going to make this one easy for you. The last laps, Max is on your tail. You have Will on the radio saying, "Don't over push it." You got the Red Bull just there. How do you deal with that pressure?
I don't know. Just drive, I guess. I mean, Max was quick. You know, I knew I had like good pace, but I made one mistake in turn 6 and he got within the DRS, and the DRS around here is probably like a second or something. So that allowed him to keep staying within that second and have a couple of like little looks. And I had to check my mirror a few more times than what I would have liked. But I stayed calm and I kept it together and I listened to Will. So that's the most important thing.
And it's just race 1. You're now the championship leader. You have the car that put it on the front row with a lockout with Oscar Piastri as well. And you won the race with everything that's thrown at you. This must be a confidence booster ahead of the whole year.
You would hope so, yeah. It is. It has been. My weekend's been amazing, you know, from the get-go, from FP1, FP2, FP3, quali, and now the race. So it's not easy to put a weekend together like this, especially when I got a lot of pressure from Max and from Oscar, because they're hungry and they're competitive and they want it just as badly. So stressful, but I know what I'm capable of. I know what I can do. But like you said, it's just round 1, so we need to go and do it again next weekend and then continue from there. So a long season ahead. We just got to keep our head down and keep pushing.
All right, Lando, stunning victory. Go and enjoy the celebration. Well done.
Your race winner, Lando Norris, Max Verstappen in 2nd and George Russell in 3rd. Jolyon Palmer asking the questions. He's exhausted. I'm exhausted. Are you exhausted after that, Mark?
It was frantic from start to finish, wasn't it? It was utter chaos, which I guess is exactly what we want from a sporting point of view. This racetrack can sometimes, let's be honest, deliver not the most exciting events. It can be processional. Yet today we had a sort of intervention from the weather, from crashes. The safety car did more laps than I can remember it ever doing before, and it provided something quite spectacular.
Do you think there'll be a few questions, a few pickups over Norris's determination to try and make a switch for tyre before the conditions actually arrived? Is that showcasing a little bit that he's still not quite fully confident to make those strategy calls? Oh, actually, well, he is, but he's making the wrong ones.
Yeah, I think it shows how nervous he is, how tense things are, even at round 1. You have to remember that they know at McLaren they have a very strong car. I think that's one of the biggest stories that's come out today, just how strong that McLaren is in a variety of different conditions. That's going to bode very well for a season, and they'll have known that to some extent in the build-up to this race weekend. That means there's a potential championship on offer. That's the one thing that eluded him last year, was the Drivers' Championship. If he can do that, it's got to start well this weekend, and I think that was the tension you were hearing on the radio.
Well, he managed to finish the race ahead of Max Verstappen. Does it feel like damage limitation for somebody like Max Verstappen?
Max, I'd say so today, to be honest, yeah. I mean, he had a gift of Oscar Piastri not making it to the end, but I think he capitalised as much as he could.
Well, they're in the cool-down room. They're all just drinking. No one's talking yet. So let's have a listen, see if we can hear anything first. No, we can't hear anything. So we'll plough on. But Verstappen then just having a chat and a drink while Norris and Russell have a chinwag, waiting for the podium ceremony to begin. Just to run you down the rest of the order then. Albon was 4th ahead of Antonelli. Stroll, Hulkenberg was 6th and 7th. Then it was Leclerc, Piastri 9th, Hamilton 10th. Thought we could hear a little bit more from him there, but Gasly was in the end just outside of the top 10 in 11th ahead of Tsunoda, Ocon 13th and Bearman 14th. Only 14 drivers to finish that Grand Prix. Liam Lawson retired, Gabriel Bortoleto, Fernando Alonso, Sainz, Hadjar and Jack Doohan all coming a cropper with the really tricky conditions this afternoon. It did feel like one of the trickiest races we've seen in a long time. When you compare it to Sao Paulo, that just felt like rain constant, whereas it's almost harder when it's rain, dries out, maybe a little bit of rain again.
Yeah, and on a circuit that just punishes mistakes. You can't afford to get things wrong. In Sao Paulo, there's runoff area in many more places around the track. But it's ended up giving opportunity, hasn't it, to a lot of these drivers. Look at Albon in 4th, Antonelli on his full debut for the team in 5th, behind him Stroll in 6th, Hulkenberg in 7th. So many really strong results coming out of this. So taking the opportunity that even some of the more experienced drivers on the grid weren't able to make. Alonso in the wall, Sainz in the wall, Piastri spinning off and almost getting beat. So you've got to give credit to these guys, haven't you? Hulkenberg, Stroll, Antonelli particularly, and Albon. I think they deserve a lot of credit for today.
Ferrari are down in 7th in the Constructors. I know it's only race 1, but they will be very disappointed with how this weekend has unfolded for them.
Yeah, hugely so. There were signs of good pace from the Ferrari earlier in the weekend in the drier conditions. They didn't manage to maximise that in qualifying. They didn't execute it perfectly. Today, I think those conditions didn't suit them, but also the changeable conditions. And maybe this is something we've seen at Ferrari a lot, where they're not able to make maybe the right decisions at the right times in the same way some of the others are. So tensions already on the radio between Lewis Hamilton as an engineer and his engineering team. So early days, absolutely, but when you've got the likes of McLaren and Verstappen and even the Mercedes of George Russell taking a good haul of points, Ferrari have got to feel disappointed.
Well, we're about to get underway for the podium celebrations, the first one of the year as the track invasion begins and the grandstands empty out for all of the fans to come out onto the track and get a glimpse at our podium. George Russell will be the first one out for Mercedes to step onto the 3rd stop on the podium, his best ever result in a season opening race. In 2nd, Max Verstappen, who has finished 2nd to Lando Norris now in 4 of Norris's 5 total wins. He steps out with a wave to the crowd. But the first win of 2025 to kickstart this season of racing goes to McLaren, and it goes to the British racer Lando Norris, who celebrates and cheers. And here is the British national anthem. The British national anthem raining out for Lando Norris, who has just won the opening race of the 2025 Formula One season. We're here in Australia, in Melbourne, in Albert Park, where after a chaotic race with rain plaguing the 57 laps, we only had 14 cars finish out of 20 drivers in the field, and just about proving to be best of all of them, Lando Norris receives his trophy as race winner. This is the chance, isn't it, Mark Priestley, the former McLaren mechanic alongside me. McLaren have built a car more than worthy of taking either driver to victory, but there is a long season ahead of us.
There is a long season ahead, and I thought, you know, we thought coming into the weekend McLaren looked strongest after pre-season testing. That's been confirmed here today. I think there's quite a gap, actually, if I really delve into the numbers, which we'll do at some point over the next couple of days, just how quick McLaren is in a number of different conditions and a number of scenarios across the race weekend, qualifying to race pace, from wet to dry. They've built a car that seems very, very adaptable, and they clearly have 2 drivers very capable of delivering good results in it.
Kimi Antonelli in the crowd, just celebrating with the Mercedes team. George Russell's podium, 2 British drivers on the podium at the end of the Grand Prix. Russell finishing in 3rd with Max Verstappen. Never rule the Dutchman out. The 4-time champion looking for a 5th this year, but it looks like he may well have a bit of work to do as the champagne celebrations get underway. And it is actually champagne now, we can say that, as they start to get going again. Now, we had a chaotic race with rain on and off, and the rain has just started to come back down as the track is completely invaded by all of the fans who are sitting in the grandstands, now having to put back on their ponchos and umbrellas.
2 minutes ago it was blue skies and sunshine again, and now it's pouring down.
That's what they say in Melbourne. It changes every half an hour here. A little word, I think, for the rookies from this weekend. It has been a tough weekend for the majority of our rookies. We have retirements from Jack Doohan at Alpine, Isaac Hadjar in the Racing Bulls, Gabriel Bortoleto in the Sauber, and Liam Lawson in the Red Bull. Also a generally tough weekend for Ollie Bearman as well. Really the only one that came out of it half decent was Kimi Antonelli. I just felt like this weekend was a real tough onslaught for them.
Yeah, it was a brutal introduction to this sport for a lot of those youngsters, wasn't it? But, you know, these are the things you learn from. Expectations have got to be measured when you bring a rookie into Formula One. They're going to have to make mistakes. As long as they learn from them and start building from here, that's all you can really ask for. But, yeah, Antonelli, the sort of standout driver, yes, he's in a better car than most of the others, but he was able to move a long way through that field and stay out of trouble, crucially, when others found that trouble. But even the more experienced guys, Alonso and Sainz, both ending up in the wall. So it wasn't just the rookies that struggled today, proving how tricky these conditions were.
Jack Doohan, one of 2 Australians in the field now, Doohan the rookie in the Alpine, retiring. Pierre and Oscar Piastri then struggling. He'll come back from this, because at the end of the day it is only race 1. He was at one point trying to plead with the team that he was the faster driver. Ultimately it felt like Norris had him at bay a little bit, but Piastri will want to come back fighting next week in China.
Yeah, he will, and he'll have confidence that they have a really strong package, as I said, so that will continue, I'm sure, over the next few races. But what he has to do, as I touched on earlier on, they're trying to vie for who's going to be the #1 driver, when inevitably at some point in this season McLaren might have to make a decision about who they're going to favour. They can't allow both their drivers just to fight relentlessly all the way through the year. We've seen how that could end, so they might have to make tough decisions, and getting your elbows out now, establishing yourself, puts you in a much stronger position when that happens.
Piastri was able to overtake Lewis Hamilton right on the final lap, and this weekend, first weekend for Hamilton in the Ferrari, it felt like he was getting to grips with the car throughout the course of each session, getting closer to Leclerc, but we had a lot of outbursts from him on the radio, and so too for Charles Leclerc, to be fair, and it does feel like Ferrari missed a real opportunity here. Hamilton won't be happy with how his opening weekend has gone.
No, I think the sort of saving grace, if you like, is that Leclerc also was down in a similar position around the point system and the track. So it's not like Ferrari massively performed and Leclerc was up there fighting for podiums and it was Hamilton that was struggling. The team struggled. They've got work to do and they will be disappointed, but at least I think Hamilton can take some confidence in that he's got through this first weekend relatively unscathed.
Rosanna, who's been on the ground for us throughout the Grand Prix, taking the brunt of the weather. Just when I thought you might get a reprieve, it's absolutely pelting it down.
I cannot tell you how torrential this rain is, Harry, and the wind is off the scale as well. Oh my goodness, this poor lady's umbrella, 3 ladies' umbrellas have just flipped inside out. It's chaos, not just around the track invasion. You could hear the screaming as they were coming up anti-clockwise, so they were coming podium.
I think the weather is proving very tricky indeed, Rosanna. We'll try. We've lost you. We've lost your RT. That is the nature of the storm that almost feels like is coming down in Melbourne at the moment, right at the very end. That was Rosanna Tennant, if you are wondering, who was crackling up right at the end there. But it really is absolutely pelting it down. And great to have actually Australia back kicking open the Grand Prix season. 23 races, 23 rounds left to go.
Is that all?
That is all. And is there a worry that there is a bit of a McLaren advantage and a deficit to the rest of the runners and the riders.
It'll be a worry for everyone else. For McLaren, they'll feel very, very comfortable about what they've seen this weekend. But it is a long season. The difference with this season to some of the others is we have this looming 2026 with a massive regulation change, the biggest the sport's ever seen, and the teams have to keep more than half an eye on that in terms of how much resource they can apply to developing this year's car, as opposed to feeding that resource into the massive project that is the new 26 car. If you're at the front of the field, let's say you're a Red Bull, you've very clearly seen this weekend you're a little bit behind, just some way behind McLaren. If you're Ferrari, you've got a lot of work to do. So those teams cannot afford to start relinquishing resource over to 26 yet. I know we're very early days yet, but these are the kinds of pictures that are starting to form up and down the grid. So the development race, albeit the last year of this stable regulation cycle, is still going to be crucial in this season.
And if we get any more races like the ones we've just had, we're going to be in for an absolute treat. We've just got a couple of minutes left of our broadcast, and I want to mention Alex Albon in the Williams with a
checkered flag, Lance, checkered flag, P6.
That was Stroll on the radio cheering for P6 as he came across the line. That really was a good result with the Aston Martins, who looked like they were down towards the lower end of the top 10 and maybe even struggling to score points. Lance Stroll's teammate Fernando Alonso crashing out of that one, but this did provide an opportunity for teams like Aston Martin. Williams reaping the best benefit of all with Alex Albon in fourth, but they were strong in qualifying too. Yeah,
they've been raising eyebrows all weekend long, haven't they? With solid results, solid short run, one lap pace. We've seen it in qualifying, but also in the pre-season testing as well. So there are signs of promise at Williams. Like, they've taken a step forward. I think the one man that's going to be most disappointed is Carlos Sainz, because he's seen how strong a package they had today, seen what his teammate in Alex Albon was able to do in finishing in P4, and yet Carlos Sainz was in the wall on lap 1. What could have been for the guy that moved from Ferrari?
BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson is still with us, ferociously typing up the race report. What's the top line from this race, Andrew?
Well, battling internet connectivity issues. I mean, the top line, I think, is Lando Norris and McLaren have absolutely lived up to their potential. And not only that, but they've answered a lot of the questions that they were facing last year. Perfect drive by Lando Norris under intense pressure, completely controlled the race from the beginning. Dominant performance from the car, a lot of pressure from Verstappen at the end. He said he wanted to end this year as world champion, and he started it in exactly the right fashion to make a statement victory.
Anybody else standing out from the midfield for you? Who's got room to improve? Who's got work to do?
Well, a really difficult weekend for Ferrari is what everyone's going to talk about. Wrong decisions on strategy again. They're going to have to regroup in China next weekend.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That is us done from Australia. Thanks to Andrew Benson. Thank you to Mark Priestley and Rosanna Tennant. Formula One is back in 2025. Australia done. Round 2 is next week, and we're hopping over to China. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.